Mind your head as we squeeze through this narrow attic door and look out over the wet slate rooftops. Tonight, we're stepping into the grey, bone-chilling dawn of Victorian London, a place where the sky is the colour of a bruised potato and the chimneys stretch out like a jagged, smoking forest. The air is a thick cocktail of sea coal smoke, damp brick, and a pot of morning porridge that gave up on the concept of joy around 1840. You are small, you are shivering, and you are currently employed in a line of work with absolutely zero pension plan. Your task? To scramble up brick flues so narrow they feel like they were designed by someone who actively hated the idea of human lungs. And let's be blunt, you probably won't survive this. At least not without inhaling half of London's coal supply and developing a very permanent relationship with a scrubbing brush. So, before we get covered from head to toe in soot, do take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what we're doing here in these dark corners of history. And I'd love it if you'd drop your location and local time down in the comments. It's a proper comfort to know who else is wandering through the London fog with us tonight. Now dim those lights, maybe click on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in the dark. Not poetic darkness, not romantic candlelit darkness, real darkness, the kind that smells like damp wood, old smoke, and three boys sharing one blanket because apparently personal space is a modern invention. You sleep in the attic above your master sweep's workshop. Attic is generous. It is more of a wooden apology with a roof attached. The ceiling slopes low enough that if you sit up too quickly, history rewards you with a concussion. You do exactly that. Your head meets timber, good morning, beside you. Another apprentice coughs awake like a tiny Victorian grandfather. Across the room, someone mutters something unprintable and pulls a blanket over his face. Nobody here wakes gracefully. You are about 10 years old, though exact birthdays are more of a luxury subscription service. In Victorian England, many climbing boys were apprenticed absurdly young. Sometimes 6 or 7, small children were ideal because they could fit inside narrow flues. Society looked at this arrangement and for an upsettingly long time said, yes, seems practical. Historians agree this was horrifying. Downstairs your master, Mr. Pike, begins his morning symphony by banging on the door. Up, move, I'm not paying you to sleep. This is technically true. He is in fact not paying you at all. You pull on yesterday's clothes, which are also tomorrow's clothes and probably next Thursday's. Your shirt is coarse wool, stiff with soot. Your trousers are patched in ways suggesting they have survived several previous owners and at least one argument with a goat. Shoes are negotiable. Some masters preferred boys barefoot because bare feet gripped better inside chimneys. Imagine your manager today saying, actually for office efficiency, we'll need everyone doing emails barefoot. You shuffle downstairs. The kitchen is warmer, but only in the immediate emotional radius of the stove. Breakfast waits on the table. Bread hard enough to be listed as a construction material, weak tea, and porridge so thin it may have once heard about oats. You eat anyway. Hunger makes a very convincing argument. Mr. Pike sits at the table with a list of addresses, his face already arranged into its usual expression. Disappointment with decorative sideburns. 3 houses in Bloomsbury, he says. Then one near Covent Garden. Rich people. Try not to speak unless they tip. You nod. Apprentices are expected to be obedient, useful, and ideally quieter than wallpaper. There's a common superstition in Britain that chimney sweeps bring good luck. Meeting one on your wedding day is considered especially fortunate. This means wealthy ladies may greet you with the same enthusiasm people reserve for lucky pennies and emotional support pigeons. Nothing says romance like darling. A soot-covered child touched my sleeve. Our marriage is blessed. Outside, London waits. The dawn is grey and the city is already coughing. Victorian London runs on coal. Homes burn it for warmth, kitchens burn it for cooking, factories burn it because apparently smoke is a personality trait. Every fireplace sends soot up the chimney, and if that soot builds too much, the chimney can catch fire. That is your mainstream historical fact. Chimney sweeps were essential because chimney fires were common and dangerous, especially in cities packed with coal-burning homes, congregations. Your job exists because everyone is setting tiny controlled fires indoors. You step into the street carrying rods and brushes nearly taller than you are. The cold bites first, then the smell arrives. Horse manure, coal smoke, wet stone, stale beer, fish and ambition. Victorian London always smells like something is either being sold or regretted. Carts rattle over cobblestones, horses snort clouds into the morning air. A fish seller is already shouting at someone, and the sun hasn't even clocked in. You walk behind Mr. Pike through narrow streets lined with brick houses, black railings, and laundry strung like surrender flags between windows. Other sweeps pass by. You recognize them instantly. The black smudges, the thin frames, the particular walk of someone who knows the day will be terrible and has made peace with it. Some still climb inside chimneys entirely by hand. Mechanical brushes exist now, and reformers have been pushing hard against child climbing. But many masters still prefer boys, smaller, cheaper, harder for Parliament to hear screaming from a rooftop. Historians still argue whether anti-climbing laws truly changed daily practice quickly, or whether many masters simply ignored them for years. Laws on paper and laws in brick fireplaces are often very different things. Your first house belongs to a merchant family, wealthy enough to own curtains thicker than your mattress. You enter through the servant's entrance, because obviously nobody wants soot walking through the front door like it pays taxes. The maid lets you in with the expression of someone who has seen worse before breakfast. Inside, warmth hits like a miracle. The kitchen downstairs is alive, pots clanging, bread baking, servants moving at battlefield speed. Somewhere upstairs, a family sleeps peacefully, unaware that their comfort depends on children being inserted into architecture. You are led to the drawing room. The fireplace is large, elegant, and currently full of yesterday's ashes. Above it rises the chimney you are about to become emotionally involved with. Mr. Pike kneels and inspects the flue. Then he says the sentence every apprentice hates. Up you go, fantastic. You remove your jacket and crouch at the hearth. The brick is cold against your palms. The opening looks too small because it is. Before stricter laws, climbing boys were often sent directly up the chimney itself, using elbows, knees and desperation to scrape soot loose. Even now, some narrow flues still require it. You squeeze inside. Immediately, the world becomes brick. Your shoulders press against the walls. Your knees tuck under you. Soot coats your hands, your face, your eyelashes. It smells like old fires and bad decisions. You climb by bracing your back, elbows and knees against opposite walls, inching upward like a very stressed spider. Black dust rains into your mouth. You try not to breathe too deeply, which is difficult because breathing remains one of your favourite hobbies. Above you, darkness. Below you, Mr. Pike shouting helpful encouragement like, "Don't stop, wonderful." You had planned to open a bakery in here, but perhaps later the flue bends. That is the dangerous part. Some chimneys narrow suddenly or twist at sharp angles. Boys got stuck. Some panicked and wedged themselves tighter. Some suffocated. Some were trapped while fireplaces below were lit by mistake, which feels like the sort of thing humanity should have solved immediately. A famous later case was George Brewster, whose death in 1875 shocked the public and helped push stronger enforcement against climbing boys. But for now, in your day, the danger is ordinary enough to be called work. You keep climbing, your knees burn, your skin scrapes. You feel like you are slowly being adopted by the chimney. At the top of the reachable section, you use a scraper to knock soot loose. Thick black flakes tumble below like deeply malicious snow. There was once a strange belief that chimney soot could help treat skin complaints, if mixed into ointments, because apparently if something destroys your lungs, someone will eventually suggest putting it on your face. Victorians were confident people, not always correct, but confident. You start climbing back down, slower now. Falling inside a chimney would be both painful and embarrassingly on brand. When you finally tumble out into the hearth, covered head to toe in soot, the kitchen maid takes one look at you and hands you water. "You look like the ghost of bad decisions," she says. You nod. "I feel like one too." Mr. Pike checks the soot pile and grunts approvingly. "Good. Next house." Of course, London contains roughly 8,000 more chimneys than your spirit can reasonably handle. Back outside, the sun has risen weakly through the smoke haze. Church bells ring somewhere in the distance. Street vendors shout. Factory whistles answer. The city is awake now. You pass children heading toward school and try not to stare. Their lessons involve books. Yours involve not dying in a wall. Still, there is pride in the work. Even if nobody says it aloud, people need warm houses. They need kitchens. They need fires that stay inside fireplaces instead of becoming neighborhood events. You know the hidden lungs of the city better than most men in silk hats ever will. You also know pigeons are rude and that rich people somehow produce more soot than science can explain. At the next house, a lady in fine gloves opens the door herself. She gasps a chimney sweep. How lucky. Before you can react, she reaches out and taps your sleeve like she's blessing herself with industrial grime. There it is again, that superstition. A sweep's touch for good fortune. You stand there, 10 years old, covered in fireplace dust, being used as a magical household accessory. You smile politely, because tips are real and dignity is mostly decorative. She presses a coin into your hand. Suddenly you become a strong supporter of folklore. You pocket it fast. Maybe tonight, if Mr. Pike doesn't notice, you'll buy something extravagant. An apple. Half an apple. Perhaps a lifestyle of luxury. You head down the street again, rods over your shoulder, soot in your hair, London breathing smoke around you like a giant brick animal. Morning is fully awake now, and your day somehow has barely begun. The chimneys are waiting. They are always waiting, and they are never impressed by excuses. By the time you reach the next house, your fingers are stiff with cold, your nose is full of soot, and your stomach is beginning to suspect. Breakfast was mostly a rumour spread by the upper classes. This house is tall. You know that immediately from the way Mr. Pike stops on the pavement, squints upward, and mutters something deeply disrespectful about architects. Victorian townhouses rise like narrow brick cliffs, all polished windows and stern black railings, as if the building itself disapproves of your life choices. You tilt your head back 4 floors. Several chimney pots. A roof pitched at exactly the angle required to inspire prayer. Excellent. The maid opens the basement entrance and waves you through with the expression of someone who has already peeled 30 potatoes and no longer fears anything. Inside, you pass through the servant world again, the true beating heart of every respectable home. Upstairs, people discuss music and politics. Down here, someone is trying to keep gravy from becoming a tragedy. You are sent upstairs this time, not to the fireplace, to the roof. Mr. Pike hands you the rope and the long brush rods, then says, "Try not to fall," in the same tone someone might use for "don't forget the milk." You appreciate the concern. Up the narrow servant stairs, through a hatch, and suddenly you are outside, standing above London. The cold hits differently up here. It has ambition. Roof tiles are slick with frost. Chimney pots rise around you like a little forest of brick. Smoke curls upward in lazy grey ribbons. Beyond it all, the city stretches endlessly. Church spires, factory stacks, rooftops packed so tightly they seem to lean on one another for emotional support. It is strangely beautiful. Also, it would like to kill you. You crouch low. Being a chimney sweep requires becoming part cat, part ladder, and part deeply anxious pigeon. There is one very mainstream historical truth here. Rooftop sweeping was dangerous because falls were common, especially on steep, wet roofs coated with soot and winter frost. Add a child carrying rods longer than he is tall, and the safety report writes itself. You secure the rope around a chimney stack while Mr. Pike moves below. Today you are using the newer method from above. Long rods fitted together with a brush at the end, pushed downward through the chimney to scrape loose the soot inside. Mechanical sweeping had become more common by the mid-Victorian period, especially after reformers exposed the horrors of climbing boys. But old habits die hard, especially when they are cheaper. You lower the first rod, plill, twist, push again. Nothing, the brush jams halfway down. Of course it does. There is always one bend in every chimney that seems to have been designed by a man who hated children and loved inconvenience. From somewhere below, faint through the flue, you hear Mr. Pike shouting, "Turn it left." You shout back, which no answer. Excellent teamwork. You brace one foot against the brick and twist harder. The rods suddenly lurch downward so fast you nearly follow them. You flatten yourself against the roof and spend a dignified moment whispering apologies to every saint you can remember. Nearby, a pigeon watches, judging, always judging. At last the brush breaks through, and a glorious storm of soot falls into the fireplace chamber below where Mr. Pike waits successors. It smells like coal and mild respiratory failure. Victorian doctors often noticed chimney sweeps suffered from constant coughs, breathing trouble, and damaged lungs. Imagine a physician in 1845 saying, "Interesting, yes, your chest appears to be made entirely of fireplace." There was also something darker. Chimney sweeps were among the first workers linked to a specific occupational cancer. In the 18th century, Surgeon Percival Pott observed unusually high rates of scrotal cancer among adult sweeps exposed to soot for years. It became one of the earliest documented examples of cancer caused by workplace conditions. You are thankfully too young to know that. At your age, your medical concerns are simpler. Don't fall, don't get stuck. Don't let the pigeon develop confidence. You move to the next chimney pot. This one is narrower. Mr. Pike looks up from below and gives you the expression every apprentice dreads. The one that means the rods may not be enough. You already know. He doesn't even need to say it. Still, he says it. Down you go. Wonderful. There is something deeply insulting about entering a chimney from the top like a reverse Santa Claus. You kneel beside the pot, remove your cap, and stare into the black opening. It stares back. You lower yourself feet first. The bricks close around you immediately. Cold, rough, and far too familiar. Your shoulders press against the sides. Your knees bend awkwardly. You inch downward slowly, scraping soot loose with a small hand brush. This is sometimes called buffing, which sounds cheerful in the same way adventure sounds cheerful when describing shipwrecks. Inside the chimney, sound changes. Your breathing echoes strangely. Bits of soot slide past like whispers. Somewhere below, someone rattles a grate and you briefly leave your soul behind. There were old stories among sweeps that chimneys had spirits, little black imps living in the bends, causing bad luck and jammed brushes. Some boys swore they heard voices in the flues. To be fair, if you spend enough time upside down inside a brick tube inhaling soot, eventually the walls do start offering opinions. One superstition said if a sweep whistled inside a chimney, it brought bad luck to the house. Another claimed it invited the devil. You are not sure about the devil, but it would absolutely invite Mr. Pike, which feels similar. You keep descending. Then comes the turn, the narrow part, the place every climbing boy fears. Your chest presses tight. The bricks close in. One shoulder catches. Your heart starts knocking like an angry landlord. This is how boys got stuck. Some panicked and made it worse, twisting themselves tighter. Some could not breathe enough to stay calm. Some were trapped for hours. Sometimes people below heard them shouting and could do very little. Sometimes fireplaces were lit by mistake. History occasionally feels like a long list of reasons to be grateful for modern labour laws. Historians still argue whether the number of deaths was undercounted because families and masters had good reason not to attract attention. Records exist, but silence leaves the biggest archive of all. You stop moving just for a moment, forehead against brick, breathing shallow darkness, pressing close enough to feel like a second skin. Then you shift one shoulder, then the other. Push with your knees, exhale, slide. Another inch, then another, and suddenly you are free again, dropping lower into open space. Relief feels almost holy. At last your feet find the lower chamber, and you tumble into the fireplace below in a dramatic explosion of soot. The cook screams. You scream, everyone reflects. Then she clutches her chest and says, "Lord preserve me, you look like a demon." You cough politely. "Only before dinner, ma'am." She laughs despite herself and hands you a heel of bread still warm from the kitchen. There are few luxuries in life greater than unexpected bread. You eat it in approximately 2 emotional seconds. Servants often show more kindness than owners do. They understand labour. They understand invisibility. Upstairs, you are discussed like weather. Down here, someone notices whether you've eaten. The scullery maid passes you a mug of tea so weak it might legally be called hot water with confidence. Perfect. You drink every drop. Mr. Pike checks the soot collected and nods. Good amount. Soot itself can be sold for gardens, brickmaking, even industrial mixtures. In Victorian London, nothing truly went to waste. Even your misery had resale value. Back outside, noon is creeping closer. The streets are louder now. Omnibuses rattle past. Vendors shout pies, oysters, newspapers, flowers, and several things that may once have been oysters. Horses contribute their own powerful editorial opinions to the smell of the city. You pass another sweep your age sitting on a curb, black-faced and grinning over a stolen pear. He lifts it proudly. Promotion. You salute him with full respect. Among sweeps there is a quiet brotherhood. Shared rooftops, shared bruises, shared understanding that if anyone ever says, "You're small enough to fit," you should flee immediately. You head toward Covent Garden. The streets grow busier. Theatre posters flap on walls. Shop windows glitter with things nobody in your life buys. Books, gloves, pastries arranged like edible architecture. You pause outside a bakery for half a second too long. The smell alone nearly changes your religion. Mr. Pike keeps walking. Dreams are free. Custard tarts are not. You hurry after him, soot still clinging to your skin despite your best efforts. A group of children plays in the road nearby. One points, "Chimney sweep." Another runs forward and grabs your sleeve. Good luck. There it is again. That strange little superstition. Luck to them, you are a charm, a blessing in dirty boots. A bit of borrowed fortune before breakfast. You let them touch your sleeve. Maybe luck works both ways. Maybe some tiny part of it rubs off on you too. You keep walking under the pale winter sky, rods over your shoulder, rooftops waiting above like old enemies who know exactly where you live. The day is only halfway done, and London, generous soul that she is, still has plenty more chimneys left to feed you to. By afternoon, London has fully committed to being loud. The streets around Covent Garden are alive with carts, shouting vendors, horses that seem personally offended by traffic, and the endless human tide of people trying to get somewhere faster than everyone else. If modern rush hour had more top hats and fewer traffic lights, this would be it. You follow Mr. Pike through the crowd, carrying the rods over your shoulder like a very underpaid soldier marching toward battle. Your stomach growls. It has now reached the stage where it is no longer asking politely. Lunch, if it happens at all, tends to arrive in fragments. Bread crusts from kind cooks, cold potatoes if the kitchen maid is feeling revolutionary, maybe a heel of cheese if the gods are unusually generous. Today, your lunch appears in the form of a pie seller shouting from a corner. Mr. Pike stops. You briefly experience hope. Then he buys one pie, one for himself. You watch him bite into it with the quiet intensity of a man observing a sunset for the last time. He notices. What? Nothing, sir. Good. You continue walking, nourished by resentment. The next house belongs to a doctor, which sounds promising until you realise doctors in Victorian London are often just men with excellent handwriting and terrifying confidence. The front door is opened by a housemaid who looks at you, looks at the soot already drifting from your sleeves, and silently accepts that her afternoon has been ruined. Inside, the house smells of polish, books and medicinal herbs. It feels calmer than the merchant's house from earlier. Less display, more serious furniture. The doctor himself appears at the top of the stairs, spectacles low on his nose. Ah, the sweep. There is something humbling about being referred to like a weather event. He leads you to the study fireplace. Mr. Pike begins setting up the rods, but the doctor watches you with unusual interest. You boys still climb the narrow ones, you nod. Sometimes, sir, he sighs. There were doctors and social reformers throughout the 19th century who campaigned against the use of climbing boys, arguing not only that it was cruel, but that it permanently damaged children's health. Many of them had seen the burns, lung disease, twisted limbs and skin damage firsthand. Some masters listened, many did not, because reform moves slower when profit is holding the door shut. The doctor shakes his head. Should have been banned years ago. Mr. Pike makes a sound that suggests he believes doctors should stick to medicine and leave chimneys to people with stronger opinions and weaker ethics. You say nothing. Children in apprenticeships learn quickly that silence is often the safest profession. This chimney is swept from below. You kneel in the hearth while Mr. Pike fits the rods and brush together. Your job is to guide the first section upward, keep the fireplace sealed as best you can, and prepare to receive approximately half of London in soot form. You cover the carpet with cloth sheets. The doctor watches this with visible concern. You almost admire his optimism. The brush rises into the flue plill. Twist. Push again. Then comes the rain. Soot pours down in thick black clouds, coating the inside of the fireplace, the sheets, your hands, your face, and somehow the doctor's books from 3 feet away. It is a remarkable substance. It obeys no known laws of physics and clearly travels by personal insult. The doctor coughs. You try not to smile. Victorian chimney soot was mostly made from coal residue, and coal smoke was infamous for coating entire cities. Some mornings in London, the smog hung so thick people could barely see across the street. Later generations would call the worst of it pea soup fog. You call it Tuesday. As the final clumps fall, Mr. Pike checks the drawer of the chimney by lighting a small flame and watching the smoke rise. Good draft, good. No fire hazard, no accidental house inferno. Another domestic miracle quietly achieved by a child who still cannot afford lunch. The doctor presses a small coin into your hand when Mr. Pike looks away. For yourself, he says. You blink. That is nearly dangerous kindness. Thank you, sir. You pocket it quickly, because if money remains visible near Mr. Pike for longer than 3 seconds, it becomes part of the company. Outside again, the day feels slightly less cruel. 2 coins now. This is practically an investment portfolio. You begin mentally planning an apple, perhaps even one with ambition. As you move deeper into Covent Garden, the streets change character. There are flower sellers, theatre workers, porters carrying crates, and gentlemen trying very hard to look like they understand poetry. Somewhere nearby, someone is rehearsing loudly enough to be either an actor or a man losing an argument. A flower girl waves at you. Lucky sweep. You tip your cap. At this point, you are less a person and more a mobile superstition. There is an old belief that if a bride sees a chimney sweep on her wedding day, her marriage will be blessed with prosperity. Some sweeps were even hired to appear at weddings just to stand there and radiate soot-based good fortune. Imagine explaining that on a guest list. Who's the small blackened child near the cake? Oh, that's Kenneth. He prevents divorce. History is magnificent. Your next stop is a boarding house. Less grand, more practical, and infinitely more suspicious. The landlady opens the door already annoyed. You're late, Mr. Pike replies. You booked yesterday. Yes, and yesterday you were late too. A fair point. She leads you upstairs with the authority of a woman who has defeated stronger enemies than chimney soot. Biding houses are strange little worlds. Travelling clerks, widows, unmarried teachers, one mysterious man who only leaves after midnight. Every room has its own smell and secrets. This fireplace is in a narrow rented room on the 3rd floor. Small hearth, tight flue. You and the chimney exchange a look of mutual dislike. Mr. Pike inspects it. Then, of course, up you go. Naturally, you crouch in the hearth again. At this point, entering chimneys has become less of a decision and more of a personality trait. The climb is tighter than the morning's flu. Your shoulders scrape harder. Your knees protest like old furniture. Somewhere halfway up, you start wondering if perhaps a respectable future in pastry was still possible. You hear muffled voices from neighbouring rooms through the walls, someone arguing, someone singing badly, someone coughing the endless city cough. Victorian boarding houses were often crowded, poorly heated, and full of smoke from overused fireplaces. Clean chimneys mattered here just as much as in rich homes, maybe more, because one fire could ruin everyone at once. You keep climbing. There is a strange intimacy to being inside the walls of someone's home. You know how they heat themselves, how often they cook, whether they burn cheap coal or better fuel. A chimney tells stories nobody downstairs realizes they are writing. This one says, too much coal, not enough money, and at least one person who forgets to open the damper. You reach the top section, scrape loose the build-up, and start your descent. Halfway down, your foot slips, just a little, but enough your stomach drops all the way to the cellar. You slam an elbow against brick and stop yourself. Pain flashes sharp and bright. Below, Mr. Pike shouts, You alive? You consider several answers. Yes, useful, good enough. You keep descending, slower now. When you finally tumble back into the fireplace, the landlady takes one look at your face and says, You'll either live forever or die Tuesday. You dust yourself off. Those seem to be the options, yes. She laughs and hands you half a boiled potato. This is now the finest restaurant in London. You eat like royalty. Sometimes survival is just accepting that a potato handed to you by a suspicious widow is the emotional peak of your week. Afternoon light begins to fade beyond the windows. Winter days are short, and darkness arrives early, like an unpaid bill. But the work is not finished. Evening jobs are common because householders want fires burning safely before night settles in. Nothing says cozy family supper like ensuring your chimney will not explode. As you head back into the street, the lamps are being lit one by one. Gaslight flickers against the fog, shops glow golden, people hurry home, and you, black with soot and carrying your brushes like a knight of extremely low status, keep walking toward the next house. Your arms ache, your throat burns, your eyelids feel lined with coal dust. But there is still work ahead, because London never stops burning, and as long as people love warmth, someone has to climb into the dark and make sure the fire behaves. Unfortunately, that someone is still you. By evening the city changes its voice. The shouting of the market softens into the murmur of people heading home. Gas lamps bloom one by one along the streets, each flame trembling behind glass like it is having second thoughts. Carriages roll slower, shopkeepers pull shutters closed. Somewhere, a piano escapes through an upstairs window and bravely attempts culture against the general smell of horse. You are still working. Of course you are. Your arms ache with that deep, heavy tiredness that feels less like pain and more like your bones quietly filing complaints. Soot has settled so thoroughly into your skin that you suspect if you stood still long enough, people might use you as part of the fireplace. Mr. Pike marches ahead, still powered by whatever dark Victorian magic keeps adults alive on tea and disapproval. The next call is at a townhouse near the edge of the city, where the streets widen and the houses become less crowded. Here, respectability practically leaks from the curtains. At the front gate, a maid lets you in and whispers, "Mind the mistress." She thinks dust is a personal insult. You nod solemnly. So does of London, honestly. Inside, the hallway smells of beeswax polish and expensive silence. Portraits of stern ancestors stare down from the walls, all looking as if they personally invented disappointment. The mistress appears before you even reach the drawing room. She is narrow, elegant, and has the exact expression of someone who has never trusted weather. You are the sweep. You glance down at yourself, black-faced, carrying rods, looking like a chimney learned to walk. Usually, yes, she does not smile, a woman of mystery. She leads you to the parlour fireplace, where white rugs and polished furniture have clearly never met a child like you. Mr. Pike gives you a warning look that translates roughly to "If you ruin anything, I will sell your soul for brush money." You proceed with the careful terror of a man defusing a bomb in muddy boots. Cloths are spread, tools arranged, brush rods fitted together. The mistress stands nearby watching with the emotional warmth of a tax collector. Some customers believed sweeps were lucky. Others looked at you like you were a mobile crime scene. Victorian society contained multitudes. You begin sweeping from below. The rods rise through the chimney, scraping loudly. Soot begins falling, despite every cloth and precaution. A fine black dust drifts sideways and lands, softly, beautifully, on the edge of a pale upholstered chair. Silence. You, Mr. Pike, and the maid all watch it happen like witnesses to an assassination. The mistress closes her eyes. For one brief moment, you think she may simply ascend into the heavens out of pure irritation. Instead, she opens them and says, in a voice calm enough to be dangerous, "That chair came from France." You nod. It seems important to let that fact exist. "I shall remember it always, Mum." The maid turns away because she is trying not to laugh. Miraculously, you survive. Mr. Pike finishes the sweep. The chair remains only mildly offended, and the mistress pays with the reluctant dignity of someone funding a necessary evil. As you leave, the maid slips you a small biscuit from the kitchen. Heroism takes many forms. Outside, night settles colder. The fog thickens, catching the gaslight and turning the streets soft and gold at the edges. London looks almost kind from a distance, which is how cities trick you. You eat the biscuit in 2 bites and briefly consider writing poetry about it. Then Mr. Pike says, "One more." Of course, there is always one more. This final job takes you to a public house. A tavern with smoke-stained walls, loud laughter, and enough spilled ale to preserve the floorboards forever. Compared to the polished townhouse, it feels wonderfully honest. The landlord greets Mr. Pike like an old friend and greets you like a useful raccoon. "Evening, lad." "Chimney's coughing worse than my brother." A sentence with layers. Inside, the fire burns hot and the whole place smells of beer, roasted meat, wet wool, and bad decisions made confidently. You like it immediately. Public houses needed regular chimney cleaning too, especially with huge hearths burning all day. A blocked chimney here meant smoke filling the room and customers suddenly reconsidering their life choices. The landlord waves toward the great hearth. "Mind the cat." She thinks she owns the place. A large orange cat sits near the fire with the expression of a minor queen. She looks at you. You look at her. You understand each other completely. You kneel at the hearth. This chimney is broad enough for rods, thank heaven, because if anyone asked you to climb into a tavern chimney after sunset, you might simply become a shepherd and disappear into Wales. As you work, regulars nearby continue drinking and discussing politics with the confidence of men who have solved nothing but feel excellent about it. One old man squints at you and says, "Sweep's lucky. Touch his sleeve, George." George replies, "Last time I touched a sweep, my cow died." The old man considers this. Lucky for someone. Fair point, there are endless superstitions around chimney sweeps. Some say touching one brings prosperity. Some say seeing one first thing in the morning guarantees a good day. In parts of Europe, black uniforms and soot-covered faces gave sweeps an almost magical reputation, like tiny grimy spirits of fortune. You personally would settle for a sandwich. As the brush scrapes upward, the landlord leans against the bar and tells you a strange story. He swears that years ago, a jackdaw nested inside this very chimney and stole silver spoons from the neighbourhood, dropping them down the flue like offerings to some tiny bird god. Apparently the bird was richer than most of the customers. Quirky historical tidbit. Absolutely. Jackdaws and crows really were notorious for nesting in chimneys and stealing shiny objects. Entire households occasionally blamed ghosts before realizing the culprit had feathers and terrible ethics. You decide you respect the bird. Halfway through the sweep, soot drops, the cat sneezes dramatically, and everyone pauses as if she has delivered a parliamentary speech. The landlord says, "She disapproves. Of me? Of everything. A philosopher." You finish the chimney. Good draft. Safe fire. Happy landlord. Judgmental cat. The landlord pays Mr. Pike and then hands you a hot roasted chestnut from the kitchen. You stare at it like it is a crown jewel. Warm food after dark. This is how revolutions start. You thank him and step back into the street, chestnut warming your hands through the cold. The city is quieter now. Carriages still pass, but less often. Most windows glow with firelight. Families gather indoors. Suppers happen. Children are told stories by hearths you probably cleaned this morning. There is a strange satisfaction in that. You are invisible to most of them, but your work lingers. Warmth, safety, fires that stay where they belong, not glory, but usefulness. And sometimes that has to be enough. As you walk, Mr. Pike is in a better mood, which is to say he only insults you twice before the next corner. Progress. He even says, "You worked well today. You nearly trip." Praise from Mr. Pike is so rare it should be displayed in a museum. "Thank you, sir." He grunts, embarrassed by his own humanity, then adds, "Don't let it happen again." There he is, balance restored. You pass a church where wedding bells are ringing late into the evening. Outside, guests laugh under lantern light, and for one ridiculous second, a bride spots you across the street. A sweep. Several people turn. Before you can escape, the groom jogs over, grinning, and shakes your hand like you're an honoured guest instead of a small, exhausted soot goblin. "For luck," he says. You nod with all the dignity available to someone holding a chestnut and smelling like a fireplace. "May your marriage be less smoky than my day, sir." He laughs. Someone cheers, the bride waves, and there you are, standing in the cold London night, briefly transformed from labourer to living good luck charm. It is absurd. It is oddly nice. Then the moment passes. The bells fade behind you. The street narrows again. Home waits somewhere ahead, along with a wash basin that will lose the fight against your face, and a bed made mostly of old disappointment. But first, the walk. The long, tired walk back through gaslight and fog, carrying your brushes, your bruises, and the strange little dignity of surviving another day. Tomorrow will come early, it always does. But for now, the city glows around you, and the firelit windows feel almost like applause. Almost. By the time you turn onto your own street, the city has gone soft around the edges. Fog hangs low between the buildings, wrapping the gas lamps in pale yellow halos. The shops are mostly shut now, shutters pulled tight, signs creaking gently in the cold. Somewhere far off, a carriage rattles over stone, and somewhere closer, a drunk man is passionately explaining philosophy to a lamppost. Victorian London never truly sleeps. It merely changes arguments. You walk beside Mr. Pike in tired silence, your brushes over one shoulder, your body feeling as though every bone has been individually introduced to disappointment. Your knees ache from climbing. Your elbows sting from brick scrapes. Your throat tastes like soot and old coal. You are, in short, thriving. Mr. Pike unlocks the workshop door and steps inside first, carrying the day's earnings with the protective instinct of a dragon guarding coins. The workshop smells familiar. Brush bristles, damp rope, old ash, and the permanent perfume of smoke that has settled into the walls for years. It is not pleasant exactly, but it is home in the way old boots are home, worn, stubborn, and impossible to fully escape. The first task is cleaning the tools, because apparently exhaustion is not considered a valid excuse in the Victorian era. You scrape soot from the rods, shake out the brushes, and empty the sacks collected during the day. Black dust spills into bins for resale. Even the dirt has a second job. That is another ordinary truth of the time. Chimney soot could be sold for use in gardens, brick-making, and industrial processes. In Victorian cities, waste was simply a resource waiting for better marketing. Mr. Pike counts coins at the table. You try not to look too interested. This is a dangerous game because if a master sweep suspects ambition, he may respond with accounting. Still, you know your own hidden treasure. 2 small coins tucked safely in your pocket, gifts from the doctor and the lucky lady. Private fortune, personal empire. You are, by local standards, practically a duke. The other apprentice boys are already back. Tom, who is older by maybe 2 years, and therefore behaves like Parliament should consult him on foreign policy, sits by the stove rubbing his hands. Ned, who once tried to train a rat to steal pastries and still believes the project had promise, is lying flat on the floor, staring at the ceiling. Dead, you ask? Mostly, he says, fair. You sit beside them. There is a quiet fellowship in shared exhaustion. Nobody here needs explanation. Everyone smells equally terrible. Friendship is easier when nobody can pretend to be impressive. Tom glances at your sleeve. Wedding luck, you blink. There is still a faint white mark where the groom shook your hand. Apparently. Ned lifts his head. If rich people keep paying for luck, I say we sell extra. A subscription service, Tom says. Monthly blessings. Premium soot package, you add. Deluxe chimney-based romance protection, says Ned. For one glorious minute, the 3 of you invent the future of nonsense commerce before hunger interrupts the business meeting. Supper arrives, bread again. A little stew tonight, thin but warm, with enough onion to prove someone nearby once saw a vegetable. You eat slowly because warmth deserves respect. No one talks much. The day settles heavily in the room. Mr. Pike finally speaks from the table. When I was a boy, I climbed 6-story flues in January barefoot. Tom says, did you also wrestle wolves, sir? Mr. Pike points a spoon at him. 2 wolves. Naturally, every older working man in history apparently survived childhood by defeating wildlife with hand tools. Still, there is truth beneath the performance. Many older sweeps had endured worse. Before stronger regulations, climbing boys could be forced into narrower chimneys, harsher conditions, and far less public sympathy. Laws improved slowly, dragged forward by reformers, doctors, and tragedies too visible to ignore. Historians still argue whether those reforms came from moral outrage or simply because mechanical brushes became more practical and society found compassion more affordable. History does love suspicious timing. After supper comes washing. This is optimistic. You stand over a basin of cold water and attempt negotiations with the soot on your face. The soot refuses. It has rights now. You scrub anyway. Your hands are permanently stained at the knuckles. Fine black lines sit in the creases of your skin like ink. No matter how much you wash, part of the city remains on you. Some people believe chimney sweeps could be recognized by smell alone. This is less a superstition and more a scientific certainty. Ned splashes water at you. You retaliate. Tom declares both of you idiots with the grave authority of a man who is 17 and therefore immortal. For a moment, it almost feels ordinary. Not good exactly, but ordinary. And sometimes ordinary is its own kind of mercy. Later, when the workshop quiets and Mr. Pike disappears upstairs with his ledgers and lifelong commitment to frowning, you slip outside alone, just for a minute. The night air is colder now, sharp enough to clear the lungs if the lungs had not already resigned. The street is nearly empty. A cat crosses under a lamp like it owns municipal property. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing badly and with tremendous confidence. The moon hides behind smoke and fog, which honestly suits London's personality. You take out one of your coins, turn it between your fingers. It catches the gaslight. A ridiculous amount of hope can fit inside a single coin. Maybe tomorrow you buy an apple. Maybe boots without holes. Maybe nothing at all, because keeping possibility in your pocket feels better than spending it. Children in apprenticeships did not always stay apprentices. Some became master sweeps themselves. Some escaped into other trades. Some ran away. Some never got the chance. You think about that, about futures, about how strange it is that your whole life can be decided by the width of a chimney, and whether someone below remembers not to light a fire. There were campaigns in newspapers, speeches in Parliament, public outrage over boys trapped or killed in flues. Acts passed in 1788, 1834, 1840, and stronger enforcement later. But law moved like winter sunlight, slowly and never quite enough. For boys like you, tomorrow still arrives the same way, before dawn. With soot, with Mr. Pike shouting like an offended crow. You laugh quietly to yourself, because if you do not laugh, history starts sounding suspiciously like a very long complaint. Back inside, the attic waits. You climb the narrow stairs, every step reminding your legs they have had an unreasonable day. The room is dark except for the moonlight leaking through the small window. Tom is already asleep, one arm over his face. Ned is still awake, whispering serious plans about teaching the rat lock-picking. You tell him the rat deserves better. He agrees. You lie down on your narrow mattress. The blanket smells like old smoke and yesterday. The pillow has all the structural integrity of bread pudding. Somewhere below, the house settles with little creaks and sighs. Your body aches everywhere. But there is relief in that too. Pain means finished, for today at least. You think about the wedding bells, the bride waving, the groom shaking your hand for luck. You think about the doctor slipping you a coin, the cook handing you warm bread, the tavern cat sneezing like a queen, the rooftop pigeon still judging. Tiny moments, ridiculous moments, enough to build a day from. People upstairs in fine rooms will sleep warm tonight beside fireplaces you cleaned. Families will gather. Children will hear stories by safe hearths. Someone will make tea tomorrow morning without ever thinking about the boy who climbed inside the walls to make it possible. That invisibility stings sometimes, but there is pride too. You know the hidden arteries of the city. You know where warmth begins. You know how close comfort always sits to danger. That knowledge belongs to you. Outside, the bells of a distant church mark the hour the city exhales. Tomorrow will be the same. Cold streets, black flues, rough brick, shouted orders, and the endless argument between your lungs and London. But tonight is finished. And in Victorian London, surviving the day is sometimes the closest thing to victory. Cold winter nights inside a medieval peasant's hut. The sun is already sinking when you push open the wooden door and step inside. Cold follows you in immediately, because medieval doors are less secure barrier and more strong suggestion. You shove it shut with your shoulder, drop a bundle of firewood by the hearth, and stamp mud from your shoes, or what passes for shoes. They are leather, cracked, damp, and carry the emotional weight of several disappointing winters. Inside the hut, the air smells of smoke, damp straw, cooked cabbage and livestock. This is home. A medieval peasant house, depending on region and century, is often a simple timber structure with wattle and daub walls. That means woven wooden strips plastered with mud, clay, straw and dung. Yes, dung. Before you judge, remember modern apartments also involve questionable design choices. The mainstream historical fact here is simple. Most peasants in medieval Europe lived in one-room houses with packed earth floors, a central hearth, and very little separation between humans and animals. So yes, the goat is real, and she is looking at you like you still owe rent. The hearth sits in the center of the room, smoke curling upward toward a hole in the roof for a rough vent. Chimneys are rare luxuries in many early medieval homes. Instead, smoke simply negotiates its own exit, sometimes successfully. Sometimes it just stays and becomes part of the family. Your wife, Agnes, is crouched near the fire, stirring a pot with the expression of someone who has accepted that cabbage is not a phase but a lifestyle. Two children sit nearby, wrapped in rough wool and arguing over a wooden spoon as if it is the crown jewels. Your mother is near the wall, carding wool by fading light and quietly judging everyone. She has made an art form of this. Late, Agnes says. You lift the firewood, heroically gathering warmth. She snorts. Romance is alive and well. Near the back of the hut, separated by approximately nothing, the family cow shifts in her stall of straw. Keeping animals indoors during winter was common, especially valuable livestock. Their body heat helped warm the house, which is a beautiful example of practical medieval living, and also means your evening soundtrack includes cow opinions. The goat, meanwhile, has escaped again. She is chewing something that definitely belongs to you. There are entire historical records of peasants complaining about animals inside the home, and frankly, that may be the most relatable document in human civilization. You crouch by the fire and hold your hands toward the heat. Your fingers sting as they thaw. Winter work does not stop just because winter is rude. Animals still need feeding. Wood still needs cutting. Water still needs carrying from somewhere much farther away than seems emotionally fair. And daylight is short. In Northern Europe especially, winter evenings arrive early and stay forever. Agnes hands you a wooden cup of small ale. Not because this is a party, but because water can be unreliable and lightly fermented ale is often safer to drink. Even children may have weaker versions. You sip, it tastes like grain, disappointment, and survival. Perfect. Outside, darkness thickens. Inside, the hut becomes a smaller world. The walls seem to lean inward when night falls, gathering everyone close whether they like it or not. You add wood to the fire. Firewood is precious. You cannot simply burn through it like a lord with 12 forests and no self-control. Every log matters. Every branch was carried by someone whose back still remembers. So the fire is managed carefully, fed, watched, negotiated with like a moody relative. Historians still argue whether most peasant huts were consistently smoky and miserable, or whether people adapted more efficiently than later writers assumed. Some accounts describe choking interiors. Others suggest smoke vents worked better than we imagine. As usual, the truth is probably somewhere between unpleasant and your eyebrows now smell like soup forever. Your son Martin pokes the embers with dangerous enthusiasm. You stop him before he invents a new family legend, not with your hand. Tomorrow's regrets. Fair parenting, your daughter, Elsbeth, asks if wolves come closer in winter. A reasonable bedtime question. Yes, sometimes. In hard winters, wolves could approach villages more boldly, especially where food was scarce. Livestock mattered enormously, so predators were not just storybook villains. They were economic disasters with fur. Agnes says, do not tell them wolf stories tonight. You say, I was going to tell them tax collector stories. More frightening. Your mother nods approval from the wool. At least one person appreciates art. There is a curious medieval belief in some villages that wolves could be kept away by hanging certain blessed herbs near the stable door. Other places swore by iron charms, church bells, or loudly insulting the moon. Humanity has always been beautifully committed to weird solutions. A fringe tidbit for the evening. In parts of medieval Europe, people sometimes believed household spirits, helpful or troublesome little beings, lived near the hearth or in the rafters. Leave them a bit of food and they might protect the house. Forget, and perhaps your bread burns or your goat develops opinions. Honestly, that sounds less like folklore and more like normal goat behavior. Agnes lifts the pot lid, steam rises, supper approaches. This creates immediate political tension. Everyone moves subtly closer to the hearth, because warmth and food create the same instinctive migration pattern as pigeons near breadcrumbs. The stew is mostly barley, onion, and cabbage, with perhaps a heroic memory of bacon introduced at some point last week. Meat is not an everyday event for many peasants. Feast days maybe, special occasions, or if a chicken makes a poor life decision. Hot food in winter feels like wealth. You tear bread, dark, coarse, dense enough to be used in local defense if necessary. Nothing fluffy here. Medieval bread often depends on available grains. Rye, barley, oats, whatever the land allows and the weather has not insulted. You hand pieces around. Even the goat looks hopeful. No, she knows what she did. Outside, wind rattles against the walls. The thatch roof whispers overhead. Snow, if it comes tonight, will sit there like a heavy silence. Inside, the firelight paints everyone gold and shadow. This is the strange thing about hard lives. How ordinary comfort becomes sacred. A warm bowl, dry socks, if the saints are merciful. A child laughing because your mother claims the goat is secretly nobility in disguise. She says the goat's arrogance proves it. No one disagrees. You eat slowly, not because there is plenty, but because there is not. Meals stretch through conversation, through pauses, through the quiet arithmetic of making enough feel like enough. There are no clocks on the wall. Evening is measured differently. By how low the fire burns, by how dark the window becomes, by how many times someone says, "That wind sounds worse." You glance toward the shutter. The cold presses from outside like another guest asking to be let in. It will be a long night. Winter nights in a medieval hut always are, and this is only the beginning. The steward disappears with the quiet seriousness of people who understand exactly how much work sits inside every spoonful. No one wastes anything, not the broth, not the bread, not the onion floating in the corner pretending it is the main event. Even the last thick scrape from the bottom of the pot is negotiated with the diplomacy of a royal marriage. Your son claims he is still hungry. Your mother says he is always still hungry. This is also true. Agnes hands him the final crust anyway, because motherhood is mostly pretending not to notice you are giving away your own supper. You lean back near the hearth, wooden bowl in hand, and let the warmth reach your knees at last. Outside, the darkness has fully arrived. There is no evening entertainment beyond conversation, work, and trying not to think about how cold the floor will be later. Modern people talk about cozy winter evenings, like they involve candles and reading novels under soft blankets. Your version involves a goat trying to eat your sleeve, and wondering if the roof will survive February. Still, cozy is relative. The fire crackles, the cow shifts in the straw. Someone outside walks past the hut, boots crunching over frozen ground, and for a moment the sound feels strangely loud in the dark. Villages at night are different creatures. By day, there is noise. Tools, animals, children, arguments about fences. By night, everything pulls inward. Doors close, fires glow. Every household becomes its own little island of warmth in the black fields. Agnes begins mending a shirt by firelight. You would like to say it is your shirt, but honestly every shirt in the house has entered a shared democratic suffering. Clothing for peasants is practical, repaired endlessly, and deeply familiar. Wool tunics, linen underclothes, cloaks if fortune allows. Fashion is mostly the art of not freezing. You pull off one shoe and inspect the sole, still technically attached. A triumph, your daughter, Elsbeth, inches closer to the hearth, quietly attempting to claim the warmest spot. Martin notices and objects immediately. Diplomatic tensions rise. "The fire likes me best," he says. "The fire likes no one," says your mother. She is, as usual, correct. There is a whole unspoken politics to hearth positioning. Who gets closest? Who has earned the good side? Elderly relatives often win by default. Children attempt hostile takeovers. The goat simply ignores all legal process. In some houses, even sleeping places rotated by season depending on warmth and draft. Medieval domestic life was basically strategic geography. Historians still argue how much privacy peasants expected or even wanted in these homes. Modern people imagine privacy as essential. Medieval households often lived, worked, ate, and slept in the same room. Privacy was less a right and more a surprising accident involving someone walking to the well. You shift closer to your mother, surrendering your better fire position because she gives you the look. There are many forms of medieval law. Most are your mother. She resumes carding wool. Winter evenings were often work time indoors, spinning, mending, tool repair, preparing for seasons ahead. You do not simply relax. You survive productively. There is grain to sort, harness straps to fix, wool to spin, a stool that has been threatening structural rebellion since autumn. You pick up a small wooden handle that needs smoothing for a tool. Knife in hand, you begin shaving rough edges while the children argue softly over whose turn it is to feed scraps to the cat. Yes, there is also a cat. She appears only when food exists and otherwise behaves like a roomer, a proper professional. Cats mattered on farms for obvious reasons. Mice have ambitions, and grain stores deserve protection. Also, someone in the house should maintain standards. The cat clearly believes that someone is her. Agnes asks if you checked the hens before sunset. You did twice. Last winter a fox got in, and the memory still lives in family conversation like a tragic opera. Livestock are not pets in the sentimental modern sense. They are survival with feathers. Losing one is not sad in the abstract. It is hunger with paperwork. You finish smoothing the handle and set it aside. The fire needs tending again. Always, a hearth in winter is like a small kingdom. Ignore it too long and rebellion begins. You shift logs carefully, preserving embers, building heat without wasting wood. There is real skill in this, knowing how to keep warmth through the night, how to bank the fire under ash so morning does not begin with despair and frozen fingers. Some families kept a small flame alive for days rather than relighting from scratch, because creating fire from nothing in January is a spiritual test. There was even an old belief in some places that letting the household fire fully die could bring bad luck or illness. Considering how much effort restarting it required, that may have been less superstition and more a very persuasive practical argument. Your mother crosses herself lightly as sparks rise. Faith lives in gestures like that, small ones, repeated ones. A blessing over bread, a whispered prayer over a sick cow, a candle for a saint when the harvest looks uncertain. The church shapes nearly everything around you, not always loudly but constantly. Feast days, fast days, marriages, burials, weather anxieties, all tied into a world where heaven feels very close and also frankly hard to impress. Martin asks if saints get cold. You say probably not. He asks if hell is warm. You say yes, but the company is terrible. Agnes tells you not to joke about theology. You tell her theology should try being less funny. Your mother pretends not to laugh and fails. Victory outside, the wind rises harder, rattling the shutter. The hut responds with small creaks, like an old ship remembering storms. You always notice winter wind more at night. In daylight, cold is a task. At night, it becomes a personality. There were winters in medieval Europe harsh enough to freeze rivers, kill livestock, and turn villages into lessons about planning ahead. The so-called Little Ice Age came later. But even before that, brutal winters shaped memory and folklore alike. People remembered the winter the ale froze, the winter the priest slipped into the pond, the winter Uncle Robert insisted geese could predict storms and was bitten by all of them. History preserves the important things. Agnes lifts the candle closer to finish her stitching. Candles are precious. Tallow for ordinary homes, smoky and faintly tragic in smell. Beeswax, cleaner and brighter, belongs mostly to churches and people who own more than one chair. Light is expensive, darkness is free, so you use little. The room grows softer as the fire settles lower. Children begin to droop in that dramatic way children do, like flowers with strong opinions. Elsbeth leans against your arm. Martin is still trying to remain awake purely out of principle. He loses. The cat takes his warm place instantly. A strategist, you carry him toward the sleeping corner. If sleeping corner can describe a patch of straw and blankets trying their best. Beds in peasant homes are often sacks stuffed with straw, covered with rough linens, shared generously because warmth beats dignity every time. Feather beds exist for other people. People with opinions about forks. You lay him down. Elsbeth follows, dragging her blanket like a tiny defeated queen. Agnes tucks them in with the speed of someone who knows if you wait too long, they will wake up and request water, a story, or explanations about mortality. You return to the hearth. The room is quieter now, adult quiet, the kind that arrives after children sleep and before your own exhaustion wins. You sit with Agnes and your mother, listening to the wind and the fire and the cow, breathing slow in the dark. No one says much. They do not need to. Some evenings are built words. Others are built from staying, from sharing warmth, from knowing exactly how tired everyone is and offering no performance about it. Outside, frost gathers at the edges of the world. Inside, the fire still holds, and the night, long and patient, is only deepening. The children are supposed to be asleep. This is, of course, a fictional concept. From the sleeping corner comes the unmistakable sound of whispered conspiracy, followed by a muffled laugh, followed by the cat making the offended noise of someone whose legal rights have been violated. Agnes closes her eyes. You tell them, naturally. You rise from the hearth with the weary dignity of a man walking toward negotiations he knows he will lose. In the corner, Martin and Elsbeth are both very obviously pretending to be asleep in the dramatic way only children can manage. Eyes squeezed shut, bodies stiff as fence posts, guilt glowing around them like candlelight. You stand over them, silence. Martin peeks one eye open. Were you talking about ghosts? There it is, not good night. not I love you. Straight to ghosts, honestly fair. Winter nights invite ghost stories. The wind outside sounds like something searching, and every old house makes noises that would absolutely fail a modern home inspection. Medieval people lived close to darkness, and darkness has always been excellent at storytelling. Yes, you say, because parenting is also occasionally making poor decisions for entertainment. Agnes sighs from across the room. Your mother looks delighted. You sit on the edge of the straw mattress while the children immediately become fully awake because terror is apparently energizing. By the hearth, shadows move along the walls. The fire has burned lower, red and gold and soft at the edges, just enough light to make every ordinary object look slightly suspicious. You begin. There was once a miller in the next village. There isn't a next village, says Elsbeth. There is in stories. Do not interrupt geography. She accepts this. There was once a miller who came home late one winter night and found someone sitting by his hearth. Martin pulls the blanket to his chin. Who? He thought it was his wife. Same shape, same shawl, same silence. But when he stepped closer, you lean in. He saw her feet were perfect. Silence. Even the goat pauses. Backwards feet are a classic folk horror detail across all kinds of European tales. It appears humanity collectively agreed that if a spirit has its feet wrong, that is enough to cancel the evening. Martin whispers. What happened? He remembered what Father Bernard always says. Never invite a stranger at the hearth without blessing the room first. So he made the sign of the cross. You do, the children copy automatically, and the woman smiled too wide, climbed backward up the chimney, and was never seen again. Silence again. Then your mother says from the shadows, that part is true. Wonderful. Agnes gives her a look. Your mother shrugs. Maybe. There were countless medieval beliefs about spirits in the home, restless dead, wandering souls, hearth sprites, fair folk, demons with suspiciously specific opinions about dairy management. Church teaching and local folklore often lived side by side like uneasy neighbours borrowing salt. Historians still argue how seriously ordinary villagers believed every tale. Did people truly fear backward-footed spirits, or did stories mostly serve as warnings wrapped in drama? Probably both. Humans love practical lessons if you package them with enough haunting. Do not walk alone at night. Do not ignore church blessings. Do not trust women climbing chimneys backwards. Knowledge, life advice. Elsbeth asks if spirits hate everyone equally. You consider. Mostly they dislike people who forget manners. Your mother nods approval. Especially spirits and old women. There it is, family unity outside. The wind scrapes against the walls. Somewhere beyond the hut, a dog barks once, then again, sharp in the dark. You lower your voice. There are worse things than ghosts, Agnes says. No, you continue anyway because history rewards boldness. Travellers speak of the wild hunt. Martin's eyes go wide. Good. In many parts of medieval Europe, people told stories of the wild hunt, a ghostly procession racing across the winter sky, led by some spectral lord, king, or ancient hunter depending on where you lived and how dramatic your village preferred its nightmares. To hear the hunt was bad luck. To see it, worse. To join it, very bad for your long-term scheduling. They say. You tell them, on the coldest nights when the wind sounds like horses and no one dares open the door, the hunt rides over the fields, hounds black as midnight, riders with no faces, hooves in the snow where no horse has passed. Martin whispers, have you seen it? You lean back. No, but your Uncle Stephen claims he heard it after drinking 6 cups of ale and arguing with a goose. Your mother says, that was not the hunt. That was just Stephen. A fair correction. There is a fringe medieval tidbit for you. Some people genuinely connected strange winter storms or eerie sounds in forests to the wild hunt. Others blamed local nobles, devils, or just Uncle Stephen. Folklore is wonderfully flexible. The children are fully awake now, which Agnes predicted and you ignored. Excellent parenting. She crosses the room, folds her arms, and gives you the look that means your bedtime storytelling privileges are under review. Now tell them something less ridiculous, you say. Once there was a saint who made soup from 1 onion and humility. Martin says that sounds worse. Correct again. Agnes tucks blankets tighter around them. No more stories. Can we have one about the saints? Elsbeth asks. That at least is safer, probably. Your mother takes over now, because grandmothers and saints are a natural alliance. She tells them about St. Nicholas leaving bread for the poor, about St. Bridget blessing cows, about local shrines where people tied ribbons and whispered prayers for healthy babies and surviving winter. Faith in a village is rarely grand theology. It is immediate, personal. Please let the roof hold. Please let the pig recover. Please let my husband stop trying to fix things with confidence instead of skill. A deeply spiritual tradition. The children finally settle. Real sleep this time. The cat curls at their feet like a tiny furry tax collector. You return to the hearth. Agnes is spinning flax now, fingers moving with practiced rhythm. Your mother has resumed wool carding. You sit with a knife and begin repairing the wooden handle of a bucket that failed this morning in a way that felt personally offensive. Night work again. Always. No one in a peasant household truly stops. Winter just moves labour indoors. The silence is softer now, shaped by familiar sounds. Wood against knife, spindle turning, cow shifting, fire breathing low. Outside the storm threatens but never fully commits. Snow taps lightly against the roof answers with a whisper. You ask your mother if she really believed the backwards foot spirit story. She does not look up. I believe your grandfather came home drunk enough to think a broom was haunted. Also fair. Then why tell it? She shrugs. Because children remember stories longer than warnings. There it is. The truth under most folklore. Stories survive because they travel better than instructions. Don't go near the river alone becomes a water spirit waiting for rude boys. Respect old customs becomes a fairy stealing your shoe. Close the chicken coop becomes a witch who prefers poultry. Honestly, very efficient. Agnes says quietly, sometimes stories make winter shorter. You look at her. She is right. That may be the best reason of all. The nights are long. Too long sometimes. Darkness stretches. Work repeats. Cold lingers like a guest who missed every social cue. Stories make shape inside that darkness. Saints, spirits, ghosts, ridiculous uncles attacked by geese. Survivors better with a little drama. The fire sinks lower. You add one careful log, not two. Wood must last. Everything must last. Your hands smell of smoke and pine resin. Your clothes smell of sheep and weather. Your entire existence smells like a warning label. And yet there is comfort here. Not luxury, not ease. But the stubborn comfort of shared light, of people who know your tiredness by heart, of a roof, however imperfect, between you and the winter sky. Outside, the village sleeps under frost. Inside, shadows stretch longer on the wall. And somewhere in the distance, the wind moves over the fields like riders passing unseen. You decide not to mention that part to the children in the morning. Probably. By the time the last log settles into embers, the hut feels smaller. Not physically, though honestly the goat is trying her best to reduce available floor space. No, it feels smaller because the warmth has pulled everyone inward. The walls, the roof, the dark outside. All of it presses close, and now the real medieval nighttime sport begins. Trying to sleep without freezing into moral reflection. You stretch your back and immediately regret every decision you made, involving manual labour since approximately birth. Agnes folds the last of the mending and sets it aside. Your mother mutters a final prayer over the fire. Even the cow seems to prepare herself for the long cold hours ahead with the deep sigh of someone who also pays emotional rent. The children are asleep at last. Martin is somehow sideways. Elsbeth has claimed more blanket than seems physically possible for a person that small. The cat has taken the best position in the room and will defend it with legal confidence. You look at your sleeping arrangement. It looks back with disrespect. Beds in a medieval peasant hut are not the cloud-like miracles advertised by modern mattress companies. No one is asking whether you prefer firm support or luxury plush. Your options are straw, wool, maybe a rough linen sheet, if life has been unusually generous, and the ancient survival strategy known as sleep near warm things, straw mattresses, when they exist, need changing because straw breaks down, attracts insects, and eventually begins to smell like a failed political promise. Some poorer households simply used piles of straw on benches or the floor. Tonight, your bed is a sack of straw with a blanket that has survived enough winters to qualify as a local elder. You remove your shoes. This is an act of optimism. Your feet discover cold floor and immediately file formal complaint. Agnes laughs softly. Brave man. Tell them I died heroically. From what? Floor. A noble end, you bank the fire carefully, covering hot embers with ash so there is still life there in the morning. This matters. Relighting from nothing in winter darkness feels like a test God gives when he is bored. Some households even borrowed coals from neighbours if the fire failed completely, which is both practical and slightly humiliating. Imagine knocking on someone's door at dawn to ask if you may please borrow heat. Civilization. Historians still argue how warm these huts actually stayed overnight. Some reconstructions suggest the retained animal heat and banked fire helped more than we imagine. Others say it was still essentially sleeping inside a persuasive argument for spring. You suspect the answer is yes. You lie down beside Agnes, children nearby, mother in her corner, animals breathing slow in the shadows. This is not privacy. This is medieval group survival with blankets. Outside, the wind presses against the walls again. Every sound is louder at night. The roof shifting, the cow snorting, the goat making a noise that sounds suspiciously like judgment. Somewhere far away, a dog barks once, then silence. Then your own thoughts, which are frankly the least helpful guests. Sleep in winter is never immediate. First comes the negotiation, blanket higher. Turn to warmer side. Realize there is no warmer side except destiny. The cold arrives in layers. First the air on your face, then the creeping chill through the straw, then the specific betrayal of your toes, which have apparently joined another household. Agnes steals your better corner of blanket with the stealth of a trained professional. Marriage. You whisper, thief. Without opening her eyes, she says, poor planner. Also marriage. Your mother snores once, sharply, like divine punctuation. The children mumble in sleep. The cat changes position with the importance of a bishop. Slowly, the room settles. This is when the mind wanders. Winter nights were long enough for worrying. About seed grain. About taxes owed to a lord who had never once tried surviving on cabbage and optimism. About whether the pig's cough meant trouble. About whether spring would come early enough. And whether early enough was ever really early enough. Peasant life was full of labour, yes, but also constant uncertainty. One bad harvest could change everything. One sick cow, one fever, one storm at the wrong time. Security was often measured in sacks of grain, and the continued emotional stability of your chickens. There were years people remembered for generations. The hungry winter, the flooded spring, the year the priest tried to explain astronomy and frightened everyone. History loves kings and battles. Villages remember weather. You stare into the dark and count practical blessings. The roof holds. The children are warm enough. The cow is alive. The goat, regrettably, also alive. These things matter. There is an old custom in some places of placing iron near the bed, scissors, a knife, a horseshoe charm, to ward off evil spirits at night. Iron had a strong protective reputation in folklore, especially against fairies and troublesome unseen visitors. A knife near the bed also discourages very visible visitors, which feels efficient. Tonight, there is a small iron tool near the hearth. Protection and household clutter often look the same. A fringe belief from certain villages claimed that if you heard knocking at the door after midnight and no voice followed, you must not answer. It might be a spirit, an omen, or just your cousin after too much ale. Frankly, safest not to risk it. You hear something now. A soft sound, you freeze. Another sound, scratch. Pause, scratch. You lift your head. Agnes opens one eye. Mouse? Maybe. Rat? Possibly. Ghost? Worse. Rat with ambition. She accepts this. The cat, insultingly, does nothing. Completely decorative. Eventually the scratching stops. Either the creature left, or it has inherited the property. Hard to say. You close your eyes again. Somewhere between waking and sleep, thoughts become strange. You remember summers more vividly in winter. The smell of cut hay. Sunlight on the fields, warm rain, children running barefoot, bees drunk on flowers like tiny flying landlords. Winter sharpens longing. It also sharpens gratitude. A crust of bread tastes better in January than a feast does in August. Warm hands matter more than grand speeches. And a quiet house, however smoky, feels like wealth. Agnes shifts beside you. Her hand finds yours under the blanket for a moment. No speech, just that small, ordinary tenderness. History rarely records it, but it is there, in huts and cottages and farmhouses across centuries, people surviving together in ways too small for chronicles and too important for forgetting. Outside, frost gathers silver on the fields. Inside, the embers breathe low under ash. The dark no longer feels threatening, only deep, the kind of darkness that asks nothing except patience. At last, sleep begins to pull at you, not gracefully, more like being dragged by exhaustion down a muddy road. Still you go willingly. Tomorrow will come early. The rooster will lie about the hour. Water will need breaking from ice. Wood will still need carrying. And someone, almost certainly the goat, will begin the day by making a terrible choice. But not yet. For now, the hut is quiet. The fire waits beneath ash. The wind passes over the roof and moves on. And you drift there, between cold and warmth, between worry and rest, held by the simple medieval miracle of making it through another winter night. Before dawn, the cold wakes you not gently. There is no soft sunrise moment, no cinematic bird singing hopefully on a frosted branch. There is only the sharp realization that your nose is freezing, and one of your feet has entered a separate climate system. You open your eyes to darkness so complete it feels personal. For one confused second, you wonder if the sun has resigned entirely and moved south without notice. Then you hear it, the cow shifting, the goat plotting, your mother already awake, because older generations apparently sign secret agreements with dawn. Yes, still alive. Unfortunately, still winter. You sit up slowly, every joint announcing itself like a badly organized choir. The hut is quiet except for breathing, wind, and the low complaint of wood settling in the cold. The embers under the hearth ash still glow faintly, small red eyes in the dark, a victory. You kneel by the hearth and coax them back to life. This is less lighting a fire and more persuading a stubborn old man to attend a family event. Small dry twigs first, then breath, careful and steady. Then the faint orange flicker that says perhaps civilization will continue after all. You whisper encouragement to the flames. This is normal. Every medieval person has, at some point, spoken to fire like it was a difficult relative. Behind you, Agnes groans softly and pulls the blanket higher. Is it morning? Legally, no. Then I reject it. A philosopher, but morning arrives whether invited or not. You add another small piece of wood. Smoke rises, curls, chooses several wrong directions first, then finally finds the vent overhead. The hut begins to warm in theory, if not yet in practice. Outside, frost whitens the edges of the shutter. Water in the bucket has formed a skin of ice, thin enough to insult you personally. You break it with a wooden spoon. This is your spa treatment, medieval wellness culture. The children are still asleep in a tangle of limbs and blanket theft. The cat is on top of them, warm and smug. She has contributed nothing and achieved everything. Respect, your mother is already wrapping her shawl. She says, if the hens froze, I'm blaming your father. Your father has been dead for 6 years. She still blames him for weather. Love takes many forms. You step outside with the bucket and winter hits you like unpaid taxes. The air is sharp, white with frost and so quiet it feels sacred. The village is barely awake. Thin smoke rises from a few roofs. The fields beyond are silver and still, hedges lined with ice, the road hard beneath your boots, your breath clouds in front of you. For a moment, it is beautiful enough to almost forgive, almost. Then your fingers go numb. No forgiveness. You cross toward the well. Other villagers appear in the half-light, all carrying buckets, all wearing the universal expression of people who would rather be indoors. There is a silent fellowship in shared suffering. You nod to old Robert from the next croft. He nods back. No one speaks because language before fire is dangerous. At the well, the pulley rope is stiff with frost. You lower the bucket. The sound of water below echoes upward like a promise from a less annoying season. This too is ordinary labour, daily, repetitive, absolutely necessary. Medieval life runs on carrying things from one place to another while questioning your choices. Water, wood, feed. Yourself mostly wood. There is a mainstream historical fact people forget. Survival in peasant life depended less on dramatic hardship and more on endless repetition. The heroic act was often simply doing yesterday again. You return to the hut with full buckets and fewer feelings. Inside, the fire has improved. Agnes is up now, hair tied back, already slicing bread with the practical intensity of someone beginning another long day. Your mother has declared the hens alive but morally suspicious. The children wake like tiny revolutionaries. Martin asks if he can stay inside. No, Elsbeth asks if saints ever had to fetch water. Probably yes, but they complained more politely. Breakfast is simple. Bread, a little cheese if luck has been unusually kind, perhaps pottage left from last night reheated into a new philosophical form. You eat standing near the fire, because sitting suggests leisure and the medieval world takes that personally. Agnes hands you a piece of bread, your fingers brush. A small thing, still enough outside, the sky lightens slowly, pale and cold. Work waits always animals first. You carry feed to the cow, who accepts your service with royal indifference. The goat attempts escape during this process because chaos is her religion. She nearly succeeds. You wrestle her dignity and yours back into the stall. Somewhere, a monk is writing about divine order while you are negotiating with a goat named Margaret who fears neither God nor fences. History is broad. The hens complain as if you personally invented winter. You collect eggs. Fewer now, because chickens also have opinions about frost. Every egg matters. Food in winter is arithmetic. What remains, what lasts, what can be spared. This is why feast days mattered so much. Christmas, Candlemas, Saints' Days. These were not just religious obligations but bright interruptions in hard seasons. Extra food, shared drink, music, community. Relief with theology attached. Historians still argue whether peasants experience winter mostly as grim endurance or as a season, with its own rhythms of gathering, storytelling and rest from field labour. Probably both. Humans are annoyingly capable of suffering and laughing at the same table. Back inside, Agnes is spinning wool again. Your mother is listing everything that needs doing, which is impressive because the list may now be longer than winter itself. Fence repair, more firewood, check the pig, patch the roof before the next heavy snow. Speak to Father Bernard about the boundary dispute with Thomas, who is either stealing your grazing land or simply owns a very ambitious sheep. Village politics, never glamorous. You sit for one brief moment on the stool by the hearth. Just one, the fire warms your hands. The room smells of bread, smoke, straw and people. Your people. This hut would look poor to anyone measuring wealth in silver. But wealth is also this, a roof that mostly holds children loud enough to be healthy. A wife who still laughs when you deserve it. A mother who can defeat fear using only eye contact. A cow. A very problematic goat. Enough. There is an old saying in some rural traditions that winter teaches you what truly belongs to you, because cold strips away performance. You cannot eat pride. You cannot burn vanity. You cannot wrap yourself in the opinion of your neighbour. Winter asks simpler questions. Who shares bread? Who helps carry water? Who stays? That answer matters more than comfort. The sun finally edges over the horizon, pale and thin through the frost. Not warm, just present. Good enough. You stand. There is wood to cut. There is always wood to cut. You pull on your cloak, reach for the axe, and open the door. Cold air rushes in. The village wakes around you. Dogs barking, smoke rising, someone already shouting at a pig with theological conviction. Another day begins exactly where the last one ended. Not easy, not fair, but familiar. And in a world built from seasons and labour, and the long patience of ordinary people, familiarity is sometimes its own kind of peace. You step into the frost, the door closes behind you, and winter, unconvinced but willing to continue negotiations, waits. Late nights in a remote pioneer cabin in the 1850s, the cabin waits ahead, dark against the white, not large, not elegant, but yours. A single-story log structure with a pitched roof and smoke lifting from the stovepipe, like the most beautiful sight in North America. There are finer homes in the world, certainly. But right now, if someone offered you a palace without fire or this cabin with warm soup, you would tackle them for the soup. You climb down from the wagon, boots sinking deep. Every step makes that packed winter crunch that sounds satisfying, until it means your socks are wet. The dog reaches you first, launching from somewhere under the porch with the emotional force of a small bear. Half welcome, half accusation. Yes, I know, you mutter. I was gone forever. Civilization nearly collapsed. He accepts your apology and immediately tries to steal your glove, frontier affection. You shoulder open the cabin door. Warmth hits first. Then the smell, wood smoke, iron stove heat, stewed damp wool drying by the fire, and the faint permanent note of livestock and mud that follows all honest frontier homes like a signature. Inside, your wife Sarah looks up from the stove. Took you long enough. Romance survives all climates. I fought 3 blizzards and a suspicious mule. You lost to all of them, mostly. She smiles despite her self-victory. The children are at the table. Emma reading from a worn school primer by fading light. Jacob trying to teach the cat frontier justice by placing a hat on her head. The cat is considering murder. Correctly. Near the stove, your father sits in a chair that has the same expression he does. Old, stubborn and unimpressed by weather. He nods once. This is frontier emotional intimacy. You remove your coat, hang it near the stove, and hold your hands toward the heat. They sting back to life. The cast iron stove dominates the room. This is the beating heart of the cabin. Heat, cooking, drying clothes, warming hands, morale management. It does everything except settle family argument, though honestly people have probably tried. By the 1850s, cast iron stoves were increasingly common in American frontier homes where families could get them, though fireplaces still existed. A stove was more efficient, held heat better, and made winter feel slightly less like a personal betrayal, a mainstream historical fact. For many pioneer families, the stove was the center of both domestic life and survival. Without it, winter became a much shorter story. Sarah lifts the stew lid. Steam rises like forgiveness. You brought flour. You freeze, did you? This is the kind of question that determines whether your evening ends in peace or in educational silence. Slowly, you reach into your coat. There it is, a small sack, marriage preserved. She takes it with the solemn gratitude usually reserved for heroic battlefield rescues. Good, because if we were out again, I was prepared to feed you decorative pine cones. Fair. Supplies matter constantly out here. Flour, salt, lamp oil, coffee if God still loves you. In remote settlements, bad weather or distance could turn ordinary shortages into major problems. You once saw a man nearly cry over molasses, and honestly, understandable. You sit at the rough wooden table. The cabin is one main room with a loft above for sleeping, shelves lined with jars, tools hanging from pegs, boots by the door, and every object carrying the dignity of necessity. Nothing decorative unless it can also defend livestock. Pioneer homes were practical because practicality did not freeze to death. Emma asks if you saw the Harris family on the road. You did. Their chimney still leaning like it has given up emotionally. Mr. Harris still convinced he can fix it tomorrow, which on the frontier is a magical word meaning never. Sarah says, he'll die under that roof. Your father says, at least he'll be indoors. Wisdom outside, the wind rises again, rattling the shutters. The prairie in winter is a strange kind of emptiness, not silence exactly. Wind is never silent, but distance, so much distance. Neighbors can be miles away. Help can be weather dependent. Darkness feels larger because there is less to interrupt it. Historians still argue whether pioneers felt frontier isolation as freedom or loneliness. Diaries show both. Some people wrote of independence and open skies. Others sounded like they were one snowstorm away from adopting a tree for conversation. You understand both. Jacob asks if wolves come close in winter. Every child in every century asks the same bedtime questions. Yes, sometimes wolves did come nearer settlements during harsh winters, especially where livestock tempted bad decisions. Coyotes too. Predators were not myth. They were local management problems with excellent teeth. Sarah says, do not tell him wolf stories. You say, I was going to tell him tax collector stories. Your father nods approval, strong material. There is a quirky frontier tidbit. Many settlers nailed horseshoes above doors for luck and protection, combining old European superstitions with frontier practicality. Some also believed hanging a wolf pelt near the barn kept other wolves away, which feels either symbolic or like very aggressive networking. Above your own door hangs a small iron horseshoe. Sora says it is for luck. You suspect it is also because taking it down would require finding a hammer in this house. And that journey may never end. Supper is served. Stew, thick with potatoes and beans, a little salt pork if fortune is behaving, and bread made from flour you heroically remembered. The children descend like organized weather. You eat slowly. Snow taps against the walls. The stove hums softly. The dog sleeps under the table in a pose suggesting legal ownership of the property. This is the frontier secret no one puts in paintings. Survival often looks like ordinary evenings. Warm food, dry boots, a roof that mostly means it. A family arguing over who left the axe outside. It was you, the lamp is lit as daylight fades. Kerosene, if available, is precious. Before that, candles and whale oil did the same job with less convenience and more opportunities for accidental drama. Light is never wasted, darkness arrive fast on the plains. And tonight, it is only beginning. The last of the stew disappears, and the table enters that brief, sacred silence that follows a good meal in winter. Not a feast. No one is writing songs about your bean-to-potato ratio. But hot food after a day in snow feels suspiciously close to happiness. Jacob licks the last of the broth from his spoon, with the concentration of a man finishing important diplomatic work. Emma folds her hands with the practiced dignity of an older sister, who would like history to remember she is surrounded by fools. The dog remains under the table, waiting for democracy to fail and bread to fall. Your father leans back in his chair and declares, "Could use more salt." Sarah gives him a look so powerful it could preserve meat on its own. He nods once. Perfect, actually. Longevity on the frontier is mostly knowing when not to continue a sentence. You stand, collect bowls and carry them to the wash basin near the stove. Water is warm only because civilization has briefly remembered you exist. In 10 minutes it will be cold again and morally judgmental. There is no true end to chores in a pioneer cabin. Evening just means the work changes shape. Daylight jobs become lamplight jobs. Boots to dry, wood to stack, harness to mend, clothes to patch, children to remind that cats are not dolls, judges, or cavalry officers. Jacob is currently testing all three theories. Sarah wipes the table, while Emma helps knead dough for tomorrow's bread. Flour dust rises in the lamplight like frontier snow indoors, except somehow more dangerous because it leads to opinions about whether you bought enough. You retreat to the woodpile by the door. This is strategy. If you are carrying logs, no one can ask you to peel potatoes. You stack split wood beside the stove, each piece a small insurance policy against the night. Firewood is never just wood. It is warmth, breakfast, dry socks, and the difference between cozy family memory and everyone becomes folklore. A mainstream historical fact on the frontier, gathering and preserving enough firewood before deep winter was a major survival task. Families measured storms partly by how quickly the woodpile disappeared. Your current pile inspires only moderate confidence, the kind of confidence usually associated with rope bridges. Outside, the wind shoves against the cabin walls again, making the whole place groan softly. Log cabins had personality. They shifted, settled, complained, and occasionally taught you humility through roof leaks. This one was built 12 years ago, mostly by your own hands and your father's louder hands. Every notch in the logs has a memory attached. The crooked shelf because the rain started early. The loft beam because Mr. Harris insisted he understood angles and clearly did not. The scratch on the doorframe from the winter the mule lost an argument with physics. Home is often just accumulated inconvenience. Sarah lights the kerosene lamp fully now. Its glow is soft and amber, reaching only so far before the corners of the room return to shadow. That small circle of light becomes the whole known world. Before kerosene became more common, many families relied on tallow candles, smoky, dim, and carrying the unforgettable scent of yes, this used to be part of an animal. Kerosene lamps were brighter, cleaner, and felt almost luxurious. You still treat lamp oil like treasure, because it is. Emma reads aloud from her schoolbook near the stove, carefully sounding out each word while your father listens with the grave attention of a judge pretending not to be proud. Education on the frontier was inconsistent, seasonal, and often interrupted by weather, work, or the general inconvenience of distance. Schoolhouses might be miles away, and winter attendance depended heavily on whether everyone felt like fighting snow for arithmetic. Still, many families valued reading fiercely. Books lasted, knowledge travelled. Also, if you were snowed in for 3 days, even geography lessons started looking entertaining. Jacob asks if arithmetic can be cancelled by blizzard. You tell him that is not how numbers work. He says numbers should be more flexible. A visionary, Sarah is darning socks now. You watch her for a moment. The steady hands, the quiet rhythm of work so practiced it barely needs thought. Frontier life makes experts of ordinary people. You learn because not learning is expensive. How to mend, how to preserve food, how to stop a roof from becoming weather, how to smile politely when neighbours borrow your shovel and return it as a concept. Historians still argue whether frontier women's labour has been underestimated or merely described so often that people stopped noticing its scale. Cooking, washing, preserving, sewing, gardening, livestock care, child rearing, illness management. Entire civilizations balanced quietly on women saying, "Fine, I'll do it." Sarah, without looking up, says, "You're staring. I'm appreciating. You're avoiding peeling turnips." Terrifying intelligence. You peel turnips. The children begin the nightly argument over whose turn it is to bring in more water tomorrow. Emma insists Jacob's turn count is suspiciously fictional. Jacob claims frontier law allows exemptions for boys with winter sadness. Your father says frontier law allows chores. The court rule swiftly deepens. You check the window. White. Wind, darkness. The prairie has vanished into weather. This is the strange thing about frontier nights. How the world can disappear 5 feet beyond your own walls. The cabin becomes an island, the lamp a lighthouse, and every odd sound makes you pause. Was that the barn, the porch, a branch, a raccoon with political motives? Hard to say. There is an old superstition from some pioneer communities that if an owl called near the house at night, news was coming. Sometimes good, often not. Other families swore by weather signs. Red sunsets, nervous livestock, the specific mood of chickens. Humanity has always looked at birds and said, sure, they probably know things. A quirky tidbit. Some settlers on the American frontier carried old folktales from Europe for generations, buttons sewn into hems for luck, Bible verses tucked above doors, bits of rowan wood to ward off bad spirits. Even in new land, old fears unpacked first. Sarah keeps a pressed sprig of rosemary in the family Bible. She says it is for remembrance. You suspect it is also because throwing away anything useful feels morally incorrect. The stove pops sharply. Everyone looks up, silence. Then your father says, "If that thing explodes, I'm haunting this place professionally." Comforting, the dog lifts his head, decides no food is involved, and returns to sleep. You sit again near the warmth, boots drying nearby, socks steaming faintly in a way that would be romantic only if everyone involved had lost their sense of smell. The cabin settles into evening rhythm. Knife against wood as you repair a broken handle, needle through cloth, pages turning, wind moving past the walls like something searching. No music except ordinary life, no grand adventure, just the frontier truth. Most survival is repetition, done by lamplight, with people you would choose again even when they steal the blanket. The hour grows later, the lamp burns lower, the stove holds steady. And outside, beyond the thin glass and the thick dark, the wilderness waits patiently, as if it has all the time in the world. By the time the lamp burns lower and the wind begins speaking in full dramatic sentences, someone always asks for a story. Tonight, of course, it is Jacob, because Jacob believes bedtime is a government conspiracy and should be resisted on principle. He appears beside your chair wrapped in a blanket like a very determined potato. Tell one no, please. Still no. Something with wolves. Absolutely no. Something with ghosts. You look at Sarah. She is already shaking her head before you speak, which is the expression of a woman who has lived through your storytelling choices and learned from them. Nothing with ghosts, she says. Your father clears his throat. Tell them about the winter of 48. Sarah closes her eyes. Also not that one. Naturally, this means yes. You lean back near the stove while Emma pretends not to be interested and then quietly moves closer. The dog lifts one ear. Even the cat, seated like a tiny disapproving judge on the windowsill, seems willing to hear the case. Outside, snow brushes against the cabin walls. Inside, the stove glows red and steady. This is how stories begin, half warmth, half warning. The winter of 48, you say, started with a storm that arrived so fast old Mr. Wilkes left his boots outside and spent 3 days trying to negotiate with snow. Jacob approves immediately. Good audience. The drifts were taller than fences. The creek froze hard enough to hold a wagon. And one night, around midnight, there came a knocking at his door. Jacob whispers, "Worse, neighbour." A true frontier horror. Your father laughs into his cup. It was Harris, wasn't it? It was always Harris. Mr. Harris, as established by history and common sense, is the sort of man who approaches disaster with confidence and a borrowed shovel. He had managed somehow to lose one cow in a blizzard. How? No one knows. Possibly the cow simply left for a better life. So there he was, pounding on Wilkes's door in the middle of the night, asking if anyone had seen a brown cow with trust issues. This is not folklore. This is the front. People imagine pioneer stories as grand heroics against nature. but often they are just neighbours helping each other search for livestock by lantern light while questioning every decision that led there. Still, storms were serious. A bad winter storm could isolate families for days, bury supply routes, kill animals, and turn ordinary errands into final plot twists. A mainstream historical fact. Many frontier settlers measured distance not in miles, but in whether they could reach it before weather changed its mind. You continue. Wilkes and Harris went out with lanterns. Snow everywhere. Whined loud enough to insult your ancestors. They followed tracks half a mile before they found the cow. Alive, Emma asks. Yes, standing inside the churchyard. Jacob gasps. Why? Because you say solemnly. She feared judgment. Your father nearly chokes laughing. Sarah points a spoon at you. This is why they never trust your stories, and yet they are listening. There is a strange comfort in frontier storytelling. Long nights demand filling. News travels slowly. Stories become entertainment, warning system and community record all at once. Who nearly froze, who married badly, who claimed to see a panther and was actually being judged by a very large house cat. Civilization depends on accurate gossip. Emma asks for a real story. Unreasonable request. You lower your voice. Fine, wolves. Jacob straightens like Parliament has been called to order. In the winter after we built this cabin before you were born, I was checking the north fence after sunset. Too late, too cold, and your grandfather had specifically told me not to. Your father says a wise man, annoyingly. The prairie was nearly dark, snow hard underfoot, sky clear enough to make every sound travel farther than it should. You had the lantern, the dog, and the misplaced confidence of youth. Classic frontier mistake, then the dog stopped. That is how all bad ideas begin. Animals know before you do. He stood still, ears forward, body tight. No bark, just watching. You turned and there, at the edge of the trees, two eyes caught the lantern light. Then another pair, then another. Jacob pulls the blanket higher. Excellent wolves were absolutely part of frontier reality in many regions. Encounters varied, most avoided humans, but winter hunger changed calculations. Livestock drew attention, so did foolish men with lanterns and no backup plan. I stood there, you say, trying to remember every brave thing I had ever heard and finding mostly nonsense. Emma asks, what did you do? Backed away slowly, like a man leaving church after accidentally insulting the pastor. Correct strategy. No running, just dignity and panic. The wolves followed for a while, keeping distance, curious more than aggressive. Eventually the dog found his courage, or his poor judgment, and barked loud enough to wake every saint in Kansas. The wolves disappeared. You returned home pretending complete control of the situation. Your father says, you tripped over the woodpile and scared yourself with your own hat. Family is such a beautiful institution. There is also a quirky frontier superstition that carrying silver, especially a silver coin, could protect against wolves, witches, and general misfortune, which is convenient because coins are also useful for buying beans. Multitasking magic. Sarah says her aunt swore placing a Bible under the bed kept storms away. Your father says if that worked, every church would control the weather. Historians still argue how much frontier superstition reflected genuine belief versus habit inherited from older generations. Settlers brought folk traditions from Europe, the South, Appalachia, indigenous neighbours, everywhere. On the frontier, practicality and superstition often shared the same coat. Why not both? Hang a horseshoe, say a prayer, also fix the roof, comprehensive planning. Outside, the wind hits the cabin hard enough to make everyone glance up. The roof groans, a long, slow complaint. Jacob whispers, what if it caves in? Your father says, then you'll finally stop asking questions. Comforting as always, snow slides off the roof in a heavy rush. The dog barks once at nothing visible. The cat, meanwhile, has moved closer to the stove and is ignoring all survival planning because she believes warmth is a birthright. Honestly, aspirational. Emma asks if people ever got lost in storms close to home. Yes. More often than anyone liked. Whiteout conditions could erase fences, roads, direction itself. There are diaries from settlers who wandered only a short distance from their own cabins and nearly failed to return. The prairie could make you feel very small very quickly. That truth never really leaves. Even safe inside, with the stove warm and family near, you feel it. The size of the land, the distance to town, the way darkness presses against the windows like a patient thing. Frontier nights teach humility, also better door latches. Sarah stands and begins herding children toward bed. Enough stories. Jacob protests. Emma pretends she is too old for stories and still asks whether the wolves were bigger than the dog. Everything is bigger than the dog. He is mostly opinions. They climb toward the loft at last, carrying blankets and arguments. Your father settles deeper into his chair. You add one more log to the stove. Outside, snow keeps falling. Inside, the room glows softer. Stories fade into ordinary silence, but somewhere beyond the cabin walls, under moonlight and blowing snow, the prairie remains awake, wide, cold, and listening. By midnight, the cabin sounds different. Daytime has voices. Boots, chores, children, spoons, arguments about whose turn it is to fetch water. Night strips all that away and leaves only the essentials, the stove breathing low, the wind at the walls, the slow creak of timber remembering every winter before this one. You are not fully asleep. No one sensible on the frontier sleeps fully in a snowstorm. You drift half dreaming, half listening, because the stove must be watched, because the roof might decide it has had enough, because somewhere in the dark your brain insists that every sound is either a wolf, a thief, or the universe sending feedback. Mostly it is just the goat. Even though the goat is in the barn, she still manages to sound like a legal problem. You open one eye. The room is dim, lit only by the red glow from the stove and a weak moonlight leaking through frost at the window. Sarah sleeps beside you under layers of blankets, one hand still curled as if she fell asleep mid-thought. The children are in the loft above, where every shift sounds like a small domestic earthquake. Your father is in his chair by the stove, apparently asleep or dead, hard to tell. He has the stillness of a man who has survived enough winters to consider panic unnecessary and blankets morally suspicious. You whisper, "You awake?" Without opening his eyes, he says, "No." "Excellent." You sit up anyway. The cold reaches for you immediately. It was waiting. The frontier at night is very committed to consequences. You pull on your boots and move quietly to the stove, crouching to check the fire. The iron is still warm, the coals steady under the ash, but it needs feeding if anyone would like to remain among the living by morning. You add wood carefully, not too much. Too much heat wastes fuel. Too little invites tragedy and philosophical reflection. A cast iron stove is basically a family member, high maintenance, absolutely essential, and occasionally capable of ruining Christmas, a mainstream historical fact. Many pioneer families banked their stove fires overnight the same way earlier households banked hearth fires, preserving heat and avoiding the miserable dawn ritual of trying to relight from frozen nothingness. You stir the coals. The fire answers with a soft crack and a brief shower of sparks behind the stove door. Good civilization continues. Outside, winds cross the prairie in long, low waves, pressing snow against the walls. It is not a howl exactly, more like a giant invisible hand dragging its fingers across the world. This is the hour when every practical concern becomes dramatic. Did you latch the barn properly? Did the horse get enough feed? Was that roof beam always making that sound, or is tonight the exciting structural finale? You stand by the window and rub a circle clear in the frost. White, just white, moonlight on snow. The barn a dark shape, fence posts rising like little gravestones of poor planning. Beyond that, nothing. Prairie swallowed by weather. People romanticize silence. They should try it here. Silence this large feels like being politely reminded how little you matter. Historians still argue whether frontier isolation created stronger family bonds or simply gave people fewer witnesses for arguments. Diaries suggest both. Love and irritation thrive equally well in small cabins. You hear a thump overhead, then another. You freeze. Sarah opens one eye. "What?" The loft. She listens. Another thump, then Emma's sleepy voice. "Jacob kicked me." Mystery solved, not ghosts, just siblings, the oldest haunting in history. Sarah closes her eye again. Justice tomorrow. She is a woman of process. You sit near the stove for a while, letting the warmth soak into your hands. There is a strange intimacy to these hours. The house asleep around you. No performance left, just quiet responsibility. This is where worry lives, not during the day. You are too busy then. Night is when worry clocks in for its shift. You think about supplies, how much flour remains, whether the roof needs patching before the next heavy storm, whether the letter from your brother back east will ever arrive, or if it is currently living a better life in Missouri. Mail on the frontier moved with all the confidence of a rumour. You think about spring, always spring, planting, mud, fences to repair, calves to worry over. Winter is never just winter. It is preparation for surviving the next thing. There is an old pioneer superstition that if your stove whistled strangely at night, weather was turning worse. Another said if frost formed feathers on the inside of the window, snow would deepen before dawn. Tonight, the frost looks like an artist with trust issues has been at work on the glass. Beautiful threatening, very frontier. A quirky tidbit. Some settlers believed placing a broom by the door, bristles up, could keep unwanted visitors away, human or otherwise. Witches, bad luck, overly social neighbours, apparently all defeated by aggressive housekeeping. You glance at the broom. Honestly, worth trying. Your father opens one eye. Still worrying? Yes. Useless hobby. Runs in the family. He grunts, which in this household means affection. He stares at the stove a moment, then says, "Winter teaches patience." You wait. He says nothing else. This is also how frontier fathers work. You are expected to assemble wisdom from fragments like a spiritual puzzle. Patience, yes, because storms pass when they feel like it, because roads open when snow allows, because crops grow on their own schedule and children somehow do too, because most of life out here cannot be hurried, only endured properly. Outside, something knocks against the wall, sharp once. You both look up. The dog lifts his head and gives a deeply offended bark. You open the door a crack, instant regret. Cold air charges in like it pays taxes here. A loose branch from the woodpile, blown against the cabin. Nothing dramatic, just nature reminding you she enjoys suspense. You shut the door fast. The dog judges your decision from the rug fair. Back by the stove, the room feels warmer than before, simply because you left it and survived. Perspective, you look at your family, Sarah asleep, children muttering dreams overhead, your father pretending not to care if the stove wins, the dog snoring like a man with unresolved business contracts. This little cabin, drafty, crowded, forever smelling faintly of onions and wet boots, is the centre of your known world. People out east imagine the frontier as freedom. Sometimes it is just this. Standing barefoot at midnight, holding stove wood, wondering if the cow looks emotionally stable. Still, there is pride in it. You built this, not alone, never alone, but with your own hands in the logs, your own winters in the walls. That matters. Outside, the storm softens, the wind lowers. Snow falls quieter now, almost gentle. The prairie disappears under white, and for a few hours the whole world seems to pause. You add one final piece of wood to the stove, enough until dawn. You return to bed, cold sheets and all. Sarah, half asleep, steals your warmer side with frontier efficiency. Marriage, you settle beside her, listening to the softened storm. The roof holds, the stove glows, the night continues, and somewhere between worry and exhaustion, with the snow whispering against the shutters and the fire breathing steady in the dark, sleep finally finds you before sunrise. The world turns blue, not bright, not warm, just that deep winter blue that belongs only to snow and very early regret. You wake because the cold has opinions again, also because the rooster, despite living several deeply questionable life choices away in the yard, believes dawn is a personal performance opportunity. He is wrong every day and confident every day. A true pioneer politician. You lie still for one moment under the blanket in the fragile illusion that, if you do not move, perhaps responsibility will forget your address. It does not. The stove needs checking. Water needs hauling. Animals need feeding. Children will wake hungry and immediately begin negotiations against chores. Civilization, as always, demands paperwork. You sit up. The cabin is dim, pale light, just beginning to show through the frosted windows. The fire survived the night, barely, but enough that you can coax it back without having to reinvent human progress. A mercy. You kneel at the stove, stir the coals, add kindling, breathe life into yesterday's heat. There is something oddly comforting about this ritual. The same movements every morning, the same crackle, the same first warmth, the same feeling that maybe with enough wood and stubbornness, the day can be managed. Pioneer philosophy in one sentence. Behind you, Sarah is already awake, of course. Marriage on the frontier means discovering that your spouse has been awake, thinking practical thoughts for at least 20 minutes before you opened your eyes. She says, "There's ice in the wash basin." You say, "I choose not to believe that." she says. Reality remains unbothered. Cruel but accurate. Your father is up too, already pulling on boots with the solemn expression of a man preparing to negotiate with weather directly. He says, "More snow." You look outside. He is right. Fresh snow lies smooth and untouched across the yard, pale under the blue dawn. Fence posts wear white caps. The barn roof looks burdened but still morally committed. The world appears peaceful in exactly the way dangerous things often do. A mainstream historical fact. Winter mornings on the frontier began early because daylight was currency. Every hour of light mattered for feeding animals, hauling water, chopping wood, repairing what winter had insulted overnight. Romance, yes, but mostly axes. The children descend from the loft like a small invading force. Emma already dressed, hair braided, carrying responsibility like a second coat. Jacob still half asleep, walking into furniture with conviction. The cat follows because breakfast is apparently a constitutional right. Sarah hands out tasks before anyone can invent freedom. Water wood. Feed eggs if the hens have decided to cooperate. Jacob asks if snow legally cancels chores. Your father says, only if you become snow. Jacob considers this, honestly strong offer. You pull on your coat and step outside with the bucket. The cold is immediate and theatrical. Your lungs take one breath and file a formal complaint. Snow squeaks under your boots. That dry, sharp winter sound that means it is truly cold, not just pretending for attention. The dog races ahead, ecstatic because every morning is the best morning, and every fence post deserves investigation. A life coach, really. At the well, the rope is stiff again. Ice forms where patience used to be. You lower the bucket, listening to the distant splash below. That sound always feels reassuring. Water still there, the world still functioning beneath all this frost. Other cabins show signs of waking now. Thin smoke rising from chimneys, a door opening, someone shouting at a mule with biblical intensity. Community. Frontier neighborhoods were often scattered, but winter made every visible chimney feel like reassurance. Someone else awake. Someone else also trying to keep bread from freezing. Historians still argue whether pioneer settlements built stronger neighbor networks out of necessity or simple loneliness. Probably both. When your nearest help is 2 miles away and also owns your shovel, friendship becomes practical. You carry water back, your arm's object, your spine writes a letter to management. Inside, warmth is slowly winning. Sarah has breakfast going. Cornbread, leftover beans, maybe coffee if fortune has chosen kindness. Coffee on the frontier was less beverage and more religion. People would substitute roasted corn, chicory, barley, anything that could pretend convincingly enough. Hope has many flavors. Emma is feeding the chickens. Jacob is supposedly checking the woodpile, but is clearly holding a stick and narrating a battle against invisible bandits. Educational, your father heads to the barn. You follow. The horse greets you with the expression of a creature personally offended by winter. The cow looks philosophical, the goat, because every era deserves consequences, is attempting to stand somewhere she absolutely should not. You move her. She returns. You move her again. This is your relationship, a quirky frontier tidbit. Many settlers named livestock after relatives, either affectionately or as a warning. You know a man whose mule is named after his brother-in-law, and, judging by tone, neither should be trusted with tools. Your goat is named Margaret. No further explanation required. You check feed, clear frozen water, run a hand along the horse's neck. Animals were wealth, transport, labor, survival. Losing one in winter was not inconvenience. It could be disaster. People slept lighter because of that. Every strange sound from the barn had meaning. Back inside, breakfast waits. You sit at the table, steam rising from your cup, hands thawing around it. The windows glow brighter now, the blue morning turning silver. The children argue over whose boot is whose. Despite the obvious and historical evidence, Sarah cuts bread. Your father sits heavily and says, "Road to town will be bad," which means if supplies run low, they become creative. Agan Paneer cooking is often just advanced negotiation with limited ingredients. There are recipes from the era that read less like instructions and more like cheerful surrender. Take what you have, hope for the best. Do not ask questions about pie. You eat. The dog positions himself strategically for falling crumb. The cat judges all of you from the chair, and for one small moment everything is still, not easy, not certain, But still, the frontier teaches this better than anything. Survival is rarely dramatic, it is repetition. Attention, ordinary love disguised as practical work. Chopping wood because people must stay warm. Fixing boots because someone has to walk. Saving the last good apple for a child and pretending you were never hungry. That kind of thing. Outside, the sun finally rises over the snow-covered prairie. Pale gold on white fields, fence lines stretching toward distance. Sky enormous and indifferent and somehow beautiful anyway. You stand, finish the last of your coffee substitute, and reach for your gloves. There is wood to cut. Always wood. There is a fence post leaning with suspicious ambition. There is a neighbour who will absolutely borrow your saw if given emotional access. There is another whole day waiting. And so you open the door, cold rushes in. The dog launches past you like a man late for history. The snow is bright now, clean and untouched except for tracks leading from your own cabin. Proof that life continues here. Stubborn and ordinary. You step out into it. Another winter morning, another chance to keep going. Which, on the frontier, is sometimes the bravest thing of all. Snowy evenings by the hearth in the 1600s. The evening begins with the windows disappearing. Not literally, though honestly glass in the 1600s often looked like it was reconsidering transparency as a concept. The frost gathers first at the corners, feathering across the panes in white patterns that look like nature practicing calligraphy. You stand by the casement window for a moment, looking out at the lane. Snow has fallen since late afternoon, soft but persistent, covering the yard, the low stone wall, the bare branches of the pear tree that has survived 3 storms and one incident involving your cousin and cider. The world outside has gone quiet. No carts, no shouting. Even the neighbours' geese, who usually maintain strong political opinions, have accepted temporary silence good. Inside, the house answers with warmth and noise, not luxurious warmth. This is the 1600s, not a spa retreat. The kind of warmth where one side of your body is gently roasted while the other remains spiritually committed to winter. Still, the hearth glows. That matters. The fireplace dominates the main room, broad and blackened with years of smoke, with iron hooks for kettles, a spit for roasting, and enough ash to suggest generations of people solving life by setting wood on fire, a mainstream historical fact. In many 17th century homes, especially outside the wealthiest households, the hearth was the centre of domestic life. Cooking, heating, light, socialising, and occasionally theological arguments. Without it, winter would be shorter and much less educational. You pull the wooden shutter tight and fasten it. Goodbye, daylight. Goodbye, any illusion that evening is optional. Candles are already lit. 2 tallow candles on the table, one by the shelf, and a smaller rushlight near the stairs that smells faintly like old sheep and disappointment. Tallow candles were common, made from animal fat, and while they provided light, they also offered the unforgettable fragrance of yes. This room remembers livestock. Beeswax candles were cleaner and finer, but more expensive. Beeswax was for churches, rich people, and people determined to smell superior. You are not those people. Your wife Anne is by the hearth, stirring broth with the calm authority of a woman who has already solved 3 household problems and is waiting for the 4th to admit defeat. She glances at you. Did you latch the henhouse? You pause. This is a dangerous pause, because memory is a traitor. With confidence, she stares. Go. Marriage across all centuries is remarkably consistent. You step back outside, immediately betrayed by the cold. Snow slides into your boot with the precision of a personal insult. The hens, gathered in their little house like judgmental old women at church, stare as if you have failed them spiritually. Which, fair. You secure the latch properly this time. A fox has been seen near the lane this week, and losing hens in winter is not a charming anecdote. It is breakfast becoming theoretical. Back inside, your fingers sting near the hearth. Anne says nothing. This is worse. At the table, your mother is carding wool with the slow patience of someone who survived worse winters and intends to mention it. She has already told the children twice that in her youth snow reached the upstairs window, and wolves ask politely for soup. No one believes her. Everyone enjoys it. Your son Thomas sits near the fire repairing a bootlace with the concentration of a man negotiating peace treaties. Your daughter Margaret is reading from a prayer book. mostly because if she reads aloud, grandmother cannot interrupt with stories about supernatural poultry, a useful strategy. In the corner, the dog sleeps like he pays taxes here. The cat, naturally, is asleep in the warmest place and contributing nothing to society. Leadership. There is also your apprentice boy, Will, who is currently trying to dry socks too close to the fire and learning why this is a memorable mistake. The smell arrives first. Annie turns slowly. He moves them. Growth. Servants and apprentices often lived as part of the household in the 1600s, especially in trades and farming homes. Privacy was mostly a rumour. Everyone knew your business because they were physically standing in it. People today ask for personal space. People then asked for less goat in the kitchen. Progress. The broth simmers, barley, onion, a little cabbage, and enough hope to make it respectable. Bread waits on the board. Hard cheese if fortune is smiling. Winter meals were practical, repetitive, and deeply suspicious of extravagance. You ate what stored well. You respected onions. You prayed for spring. There is a quirky tidbit from the period. Some households believed bread should never be placed upside down on the table, as it invited bad luck, or worse, insulted the blessing of food itself. Others claimed whistling indoors called bad weather. Your mother believes both and also suspects mirrors after dark. Honestly, easier just to comply. Thomas asks if the snow means Father Bernard will cancel Sunday service. Your mother laughs so hard she coughs. God may forgive snow. Father Bernard does not. True church attendance in winter remained important, though roads could become miserable. Religion shaped the rhythm of life in the 1600s. Holy days, fasting days, saints' feasts, prayers for harvests, prayers for illness. Prayers because your neighbour's pig had once again chosen chaos. Faith and weather were frequent collaborators. Historians still argue how much ordinary people separated official church teaching from older folk customs. Many households blended both easily. Prayer on Sunday, protective charms near the cradle on Monday, and complete certainty that old Mrs. Carter down the lane definitely spoke to ravens. Humans love spiritual backup plans. Outside, the wind rises. It presses against the shutters with a long wooden sigh. Snow taps softly at the window. The room seems smaller now, gathered inward around light and fire. This is winter's real trick. Not cold, but closeness. Everyone pulled into the same glow. Same warmth, same bread, same argument about whether Thomas actually fed the goat. He did not. Anne ladles broth into bowls. Steam curls upward. The children move closer. Even the dog becomes suddenly religious. You sit at the table, candlelight soft across faces. You know better than your own hands. The fire cracks. The wind waits outside. And the long night, only just beginning, settles gently around the house. The first spoonful of hot broth feels like forgiveness, not dramatic forgiveness, no choir of angels, just cabbage, barley, and the deeply emotional relief of not being cold for at least 12 consecutive seconds. Honestly, enough. Everyone leans toward the table as if warmth itself has been invited to supper. Bread is torn, not sliced, because bread in winter deserves respect, and also because knives mysteriously disappear in every century. You suspect they migrate to the same place as missing socks and honest tax records. Annie passes you a heel of brown bread. Your mother takes the better piece without apology. Seniority. Thomas tries to reach for the cheese before anyone else. Your mother taps his wrist with the speed of divine judgment. Wait. He waits. Civilization survives. Meals in the 1600s were deeply structured by season and status. Richer households might have game, pies, spices, and enough courses to qualify as architecture. Ordinary homes had pottage, broth, bread, preserved vegetables, salted meat when available, and a lifelong relationship with turnips. Turnips were not food so much as a recurring personality test. Tonight the broth is honest and warm. That is enough. Margaret asks if there will be apple tart for Candlemas. Annie says, if apples still exist. A fair and cautious promise. Winter stores were always a negotiation. Apples wrinkled in cellars. Salt pork lasted if mice respected boundaries. Cheese improved with age right up until it became a political issue. Food preservation in the 1600s was less culinary art and more strategic pessimism. Assume February is plotting against you. Prepare accordingly. Will, the apprentice, burns his tongue on the broth and tries to recover with dignity. He fails. You say bravery noted, he says. It attacked me. Correct, the dog receives a crust under the table and immediately believes himself beloved by history. The cat receives nothing and still believes herself queen, also correct. By the hearth, the kettle hangs over the fire, steam rising in lazy curls. Water for tea if you are fancy, ale warming if you're practical, or simply hot water because winter sometimes requires emotional support in liquid form. Tea is not yet the household empire it will later become. Ale, small beer, broth, these are more common companions. Yes, children too, because clean water had trust issues, a mainstream historical fact. In many early modern households, small beer, a weak low-alcohol brew, was safer and more common than plain water for daily drinking. It was less tavern disaster and more responsible hydration with personality. Thomas once called it sad beer. He was not wrong. After supper, the table transforms, because tables in old houses are not furniture. They are shape-shifting survival platforms, first for eating, then for mending, then for writing letters, then for someone inevitably sitting on it, because chairs are occupied by elders, cats, and bad decisions. Anne clears bowls and sets out mending. Stockings, shirt cuffs, a sleeve that lost an argument with a fence. You take up a small knife and begin shaving a smooth handle for the broken wooden spoon. Thomas somehow destroyed without touching it. A legal defense. Margaret helps grandmother wind wool. Will polishes boots with the expression of a man reconsidering apprenticeship as a concept. Your mother watches all of this like a queen supervising a mildly disappointing court. Outside, the snow thickens. You can hear it now against the shutters. Soft, steady, patient. No dramatic storm, just the quiet certainty of winter adding paperwork. A servant from the neighbouring farm passed earlier with news that old Mr. Fletcher slipped on the church path and blamed Satan specifically. This has improved everyone's evening. News travelled by foot, cart and gossip. Mostly gossip. Villages in the 1600s ran on information exchanged at wells, markets and over fences under the noble tradition of pretending concern while enjoying details. Poor man, your mother says then, with great satisfaction, he was wearing those ridiculous boots. There it is, compassion. Margaret asks if people really believed witches could spoil butter. Anne says, only if your butter was already terrible. Your mother says, and if Goody Harper touched the churn. There were countless household beliefs around food and luck. Butter refusing to churn, possibly weather, possibly bad cream, possibly a witch with a grudge and excellent timing. People in the 1600s often lived with one foot in practical routine and the other in a world full of signs, omens, blessings, and deeply suspicious neighbours. Historians still argue whether witch beliefs were mostly fear, social tension, or simply communities trying to explain misfortune with the tools they had. Likely all three. Nothing says village politics, like blaming your cow's mood on Margaret from down the lane. Not your Margaret, different Margaret, probably. A quirky tidbit. Some households hung dried herbs like rosemary, rosemum or St. John's wort near doors to ward off evil spirits or misfortune. Others placed shoes in walls during building. Yes, actual shoes, believing they protected the home. Ancient security systems. Some future archaeologist finding your left boot in a wall is going to have questions. Annie keeps rosemary by the shelf. Your mother claims it protects the house. You suspect it mostly protects the stew from despair. The candles burn lower. Tallow candles do not fade romantically. They collapse like overworked bureaucrats. You trim the wick. The smell improves from farmyard memory to merely slightly aggressive evening. Margaret reads aloud now, stumbling over longer words while grandmother corrects pronunciation with the confidence of someone who cannot herself read but deeply mistrusts hesitation. Authority's a skill. Thomas sits by the hearth, staring into the fire in that universal child posture that suggests either deep philosophy or absolutely no thoughts at all. Neatly both. You ask what he is thinking. If ghosts get cold. Reasonable question. Annie said, no ghost talk at supper. After supper, still no. The 1600s had excellent ghost infrastructure. Every village had stories. Spirits on roads, candles seen in churchyards, footsteps in empty attics. That one aunt who definitely returned as a goose to settle unfinished business. Winter nights improved these stories tremendously. Everything sounds haunted when the wind is involved. You tell Thomas ghosts probably stay near fireplaces out of professional courtesy, your mother says. Spirits hate untidy hearths. Anne looks at you. You look at Thomas, looks at the dog. The dog becomes briefly theological, good. Fear can be educational. Outside, the church bell rings faintly through the snow, slow and distant, carrying farther in the cold. The hour is later than you thought. Always dolorous, night in winter folds strangely. One moment twilight, the next midnight threatening legal action. The room grows quieter. Work slows, needles pause. Wood settles in the hearth with a soft shift of sparks. You lean back, hands warm, boots drying, family close, and feel that rare thing people in every century recognize immediately. Enough, not abundance, not luxury. Just enough. Enough bread, enough fire. Enough people around the table who would notice if you were gone. In a century of hard weather and harder certainty, that is its own kind of wealth. And outside, beyond the shuttered windows and the sleeping lane, the snow keeps falling, soft as breath, patient as history. By the time the last candle begins leaning dramatically toward its own extinction, someone mentions ghosts. It is always someone. Tonight, naturally, it is Thomas. Because children hear one creak in the floorboards and immediately assume either pirates or the dead. There was knocking last night, he says from the hearth. Annie closes her eyes. No, your mother opens hers wider. Yes, excellent. Balanced parenting. You are seated near the fire with a mug of warm small beer, enjoying the brief illusion that evening might proceed peacefully. That illusion dies immediately. Thomas leans forward, from the wall. Margaret, who claims she is too old for ghost stories, and is therefore listening with the intensity of a courtroom witness, puts down her sewing. Will the apprentice stops polishing boots, because apparently leather can wait if spirits are involved. The dog lifts one ear. Even the cat looks mildly interested, though because drama is warm. Annie folds her arms. It was the wind. Your mother says, the wind does not knock 3 times. You say it might if it is polite. No one appreciates your scholarship. The truth is, winter nights in the 1600s were perfect breeding grounds for ghosts. Long dark, strange noises, houses that sighed like old ships, candlelight that turned every coat on a peg into a suspicious person with poor intentions. And people believed things, not always wildly, not always foolishly, but sincerely. A world without electric light gives imagination excellent working conditions. You stir the fire, sparks rise. Thomas whispers, tell the chimney story. Anne says absolutely not. Your mother says yes. And because history is built on poor decisions, you begin. There was once a widow in the next village. There is no next village, says Margaret. There is in stories. Geography is flexible. She accepts this. She lived alone in a cottage near the old road. Every winter on the first heavy snow she heard footsteps on the roof. Thomas immediately pulls the blanket higher. Good. Not birds, not branches, footsteps, slow, heavy, always above the hearth. Every year, same night. Will asks, what was it? You lower your voice. She thought it was her husband. Anne gives you the look that means if children have nightmares, you will personally be explaining them at sunrise. Worth it. The old man had died in winter, years before, caught in the snow coming home from market. And every year when the first storm came, she heard him walking there, above the fire, above the bed, as if checking she was warm. Silence, even the dog seems professionally invested. Margaret says quietly, did she see you shake your head? No, only the steps. And once, ashes on the floor beneath the chimney, as though boots had stood there. Thomas looks directly at the fireplace and reconsiders all previous life choices. Perfect, this kind of tale was common. Hearth spirits, returning souls, restless family members, visitors from the other side who apparently still cared very much about household management. Some stories were comforting, some were warnings, some were clearly invented by grandmothers who enjoyed controlling bedtime. Historians still argue how literal these beliefs were. Did people truly expect the dead to return by the chimney, or did stories help shape grief into something survivable? Probably both. Humans like mystery, but we love missing people. Your mother says, my aunt swore she saw your grandfather after he died. Anne says, your aunt also thought geese predicted taxes. Sometimes they do. Strong argument. There was also widespread belief that the dead should be treated carefully during the Christmas season. In some regions, people left the hearth especially tidy, or a little food near the fire, not exactly for ghosts, but because winter blurred lines between memory, faith and habit. And because if your grandmother says leave the bread, you leave the bread's survival. Thomas asks if spirits come through mirrors. Now we are really thriving. Mirrors in the 1600s carried all kinds of suspicion. Cover them during mourning. Do not look into them too long by candlelight. Absolutely do not trust one after midnight if you value emotional stability. A quirky tidbit. In some households, people believed mirrors could trap spirits or attract them, especially during storms or deaths. This is either supernatural caution or simply the correct response to seeing yourself unexpectedly at 2 a.m. You tell Thomas, if a mirror speaks to you, first check whether it is your grandmother. Your mother says, if it sounds wise, it is. Margaret asks about witches now, because once the door is open, children drive the entire wagon through it. The village always has one person everyone suspects, not because of spells necessarily. Sometimes just because they are old, solitary, own too many herbs, and have the dangerous habit of being right. Old Goody Harper, for instance, who lives near the brook with 7 chickens, a black cat, and enough opinions to qualify as weather. If butter fails, someone blames her. If rain comes early, someone blames her. If Thomas forgets to latch the gate. Somehow also Goody Harper. Convenient, which fears in the 1600s were real, and in some places devastatingly serious. But in everyday village life, suspicion often mixed with ordinary grudges, envy, and the timeless human tradition of needing someone to blame for bad milk. Anne says firmly, we do not call people witches because cows are dramatic. A wise legal standard outside, wind brushes the shutters again. A branch taps once against the wall. Thomas nearly leaves his own body. You reassure him it is only the pear tree. Probably the room grows darker as the candle shortens. The fire becomes the main light now. Red, gold, and shadow moving along the walls like slow dancers with unresolved issues. This is when every ordinary sound feels suspicious. The settling roof, the stairs, the chicken deciding midnight is a good time for philosophy. You hear a scrape from above. Will freezes. What was that? You listen. Another scrape, pause. Then a heavy little thump. Anna says, mouse. Your mother says, spirit. You say, mouse with ambition. Most likely, rats and mice were constant housemates in early modern homes. Grain storage, warmth, hidden corners. It was basically an invitation. The cat, whose entire professional purpose should involve this problem, stretches once and returns to sleep. Management failure. Margaret asks if the wild hunt passes here. Now that is excellent panic. Across Europe, stories of the wild hunt haunted winter nights. A spectral procession of riders, hounds, and dead souls racing across the sky during storms. To hear it meant bad luck. To see it meant your schedule had changed permanently. People heard wind in the trees and decided, reasonably, that ghost horses were involved. Honestly, have you heard wind at midnight? Fair conclusion. You tell them no, the hunt passes farther north, your mother says. Aunt, unless it likes this road. Helpful Annie stands. Enough. Bed. The children protest because terror is somehow energizing. Still, blankets are gathered. Shoes kicked off. Final negotiations about candles begin. Thomas asks if ghosts can climb stairs. You say only if invited. He does not sleep for 3 years, Pocrentin. As the children disappear upstairs and Will blows out the last candle, the room softens into hearth light and shadow. Outside, snow continues to fall over the lane, over the churchyard, over old roofs and older stories. Inside, the fire breathes low, and somewhere between folklore and memory, the dark keeps its secrets. Once the last candle is out, the house changes shape. It is the same room, the same table, the same hearth, the same suspicious floorboard near the stairs that has been planning your murder since Michaelmas. But in darkness, everything becomes older, larger, slightly judgmental. The fire remains, low and red, breathing softly in the grate. Without it, the room would feel abandoned. With it, the house still feels inhabited. By you, certainly, and possibly by every ancestor who ever paid taxes reluctantly. You stand for a moment near the embers, letting your eyes adjust. This is the final ritual of the evening, deciding how much warmth tomorrow deserves. Too much wood, and you waste precious fuel. Too little, and dawn arrives with frost inside your soul. You take the poker and settle the coals, banking the fire carefully beneath ash so it will survive until morning. This is not merely housekeeping. This is diplomacy with winter, a mainstream historical fact. Before modern heating, keeping a household fire alive overnight was essential labor. Relighting from scratch in freezing weather was miserable enough that preserving embers became almost sacred routine. You do this with the seriousness of a priest and the posture of a man whose back has formally resigned. Behind you, Anne is upstairs settling the children, which means she is conducting final negotiations over blankets, prayers, and whether Thomas can legally sleep with the dog for ghost defense. He cannot, the dog, notably, has not volunteered. Your mother is already in her bed nook near the warmest wall, wrapped in blankets and disapproval. She claims older bones predict weather better than the church bell. Tonight, according to her knees, more snow, science. Will the apprentice sleeps near the kitchen corner on a truckle bed that slides partly beneath the loft, like furniture trying to avoid responsibility. Apprentices and servants rarely enjoyed private chambers. Privacy in the 1600s was mostly something rich people described badly. Most people slept where space allowed. Beds were warm if you were lucky, shared if you were practical, and full of straw if life was honest. Sometimes also full of insects, but we are trying to relax. Your own bed upstairs is a wooden frame with a rope support and a mattress stuffed with straw, feathers if fortune smiled, and probably several long-term disagreements. No one is asking whether you prefer memory foam. History is not kind like that. You climb the stairs with a candle stub, the flame throwing enormous shadows behind you like your own personal ghost procession. Thomas is still awake. Of course, he sits under the blanket with the expression of a man who has just remembered mortality. Did you hear knocking? No. What if the widow's husband comes here by mistake? Then he'll be disappointed by our housekeeping. He considers this. Fair Margaret is already asleep, because older sisters develop the survival skill of ignoring nonsense. You say prayers with them. Short, familiar words, half faith, half rhythm. Bless the house, bless the animals, bless tomorrow's bread. Please let the goat stop being theatrical, traditional. In many households, evening prayers were as ordinary as locking the door. Religion shaped daily life in ways both grand and domestic. Saints and supper lived in the same room. Some families also added folk protections, a cross traced on the pillow, iron near the bed, herbs hung by the window. Church doctrine and grandmother policy often worked together with suspicious efficiency. A quirky tidbit: people in parts of Europe placed iron objects, keys, scissors, knives, near beds or cradles to ward off spirits and fairies. Nothing says spiritual security like bedside cutlery. You have a small iron key on the shelf nearby. Protection and poor organization often look identical. Downstairs, Anne joins you at last. She blows out the candle. Darkness settles instantly. Real darkness, not modern darkness with street lamps politely pretending. True night, shaped only by moonlight through frost, and the faint red breath of the hearth below. You lie down, the bed is cold in the specific way betrayal is cold. Sheets in winter always feel like they were stored in the moral center of a glacier. Anne steals the warmer side with the efficiency of a trained military commander. Marriage. You whisper, thief. She whispers back, slow. Also, marriage sleep in the 1600s is not elegant. It is a negotiation. First the blankets, then the feet, then the realization that your left shoulder has chosen suffering, then the chamber pot question. Ah yes, the chamber pot, the small ceramic ambassador of bad timing, because no one wants to leave a warm bed in January and march heroically across a freezing house toward an outdoor privy that has all the charm of a legal punishment. So yes, chamber pots existed for excellent reasons and terrible romance. History is glamorous. Some scholars note that sleep itself often followed different patterns. Many people described a first sleep and second sleep, waking in the middle of the night for prayer, quiet work, or simply lying there, wondering if life had always smelled faintly of cabbage. Historians still argue how universal this segmented sleep was, but honestly, if you have ever stared at a ceiling at 2 a.m. thinking about taxes, congratulations, you are historically accurate tonight. Somewhere between first sleep and second regret you wake. The room is still, very still then. Creak. You open one eye, there it is again. A slow step on the stair. Your entire body becomes attention beside you and does not move, either asleep or wisely refusing to participate. Another step, creak. You hold your breath, ghost, thief, Thomas on a dramatic mission. The step reaches the landing, pause. Then a soft scratching at the door. You sit up slowly, already planning how to defend the family with one sock and poor judgment. The scratching again, then a small offended sound, the cat. Of course. She has been outside, has reconsidered freedom, and now demands immediate re-entry like a noble woman returning from scandal. You let her in, she walks past you without gratitude, royalty. Back in bed, your heart slowly remembers professionalism. Anne says into the darkness, heroic. From a cat, she was determined. This will not be recorded in ballads. Outside, the wind softens, snow slides from the roof in a heavy hush. The house settles around you. Wood sighing, children dreaming, your mother snoring once like an official ruling save. Not grand, not perfect, but safe enough that matters. You think about how many winter nights this house has held. Illnesses survived, babies born, arguments about bread, candlelight on tired hands, boots drying by the hearth, names remembered and forgotten. Most of history happened like this, quickly, at home. People enduring weather and each other, no monuments, just mornings that kept arriving. Below, the banked fire waits under ash. Above, the frost thickens on the panes. And somewhere between old stories and ordinary sleep, with Anne warm beside you and the cat now occupying far too much blanket for a creature that pays no rent, you drift at last into the second sleep of winter. Before dawn, the cold arrives first, not politely, not with subtlety. It simply places an icy hand on your face and announces that comfort was a temporary arrangement. You wake in darkness, buried beneath blankets, with the immediate and ancient conviction that leaving this bed would be a tactical error. Outside, the world is still quiet, no carts, no church bell, only the hush of snow and the distant complaint of wind moving over the roof. Beside you, Anne is asleep, somehow warm, which feels like suspicious behaviour. The cat is also asleep, occupying enough blanket to qualify as a landlord. You attempt to reclaim territory. The cat objects, you lose. History remains accurate. Then from downstairs, the unmistakable sound of your mother coughing once. The official declaration that the household may no longer pretend mourning is optional. There it is, civilization. You sit up. Immediate regret. The air upstairs is cold enough to inspire spiritual reflection. Your breath clouds faintly. You pull on stockings and boots with the grace of a man being punished for unknown crimes. This is why people in portraits never smile. They were cold. You take the candle stub, relight it from the ember lantern kept nearby, and head downstairs where the banked fire waits like a grumpy old friend expecting attention. The hearth is mostly ash now, but beneath it, life. A little red glow, enough you kneel. Stir carefully, add kindling, blow until sparks answer. There is a deep satisfaction in this moment, the first true flame of morning. Tiny, ordinary, and somehow more reassuring than half the political promises in Europe. The fire catches good. You have successfully defeated dawn, a mainstream historical fact. Preserving and relighting the household fire was one of the first tasks of winter mornings. Without it, breakfast stalled, water stayed cruel, and the entire house entered open rebellion. Fire first, then everything else. Your mother appears wrapped in shawls and superior judgment. I told you more snow. You look toward the shutter. She is right, of course she is. Old women and weather have a private agreement with God. She settles near the hearth while you hang the kettle, and begin the sacred labour of warming the room enough for everyone else to become human again. Soon Thomas comes downstairs, hair resembling a theological argument. He squints at the fire. Did ghosts come? No. Did the cat? Yes. He nods, more believable. Margaret follows, already dressed, carrying the useful competence of eldest daughters across all centuries. She begins sweeping without being asked, which makes you briefly wonder if she has been replaced by a saint. Probably temporary. Will the apprentice stumbles in last, looking like sleep personally insulted him. Annie arrives after, tying back her hair, and within moments the kitchen becomes a battlefield of practical miracles. Bread from yesterday, porridge if oats remain, ale warmed, maybe eggs if the hens have remembered their civic duties. Morning in the 1600s does not ease itself in gently. It begins like a list shouted across a room. You open the shutter, the world outside is white and blue. Fresh snow lies across the lane, smooth and untouched except for the tracks of something small. Fox, cat, neighbour with poor boundaries. The pear tree bends under frost. Smoke rises from distant chimneys in slow grey lines. Each chimney means another household waking, another hearth stirred, another family arguing over boots. Winter makes a village feel connected that way. You cannot see your neighbours clearly, but you see their smoke, proof of life. Historians still argue whether early modern village life created stronger community bonds or simply made privacy impossible. Probably both. When everyone knows who borrowed your ladder in 1637, intimacy becomes mandatory. Anne hands you a pail. The hens, of course, outside again, the snow bites harder in the morning, sharp and clean. The yard crunches beneath your boots. The dog races past with the unearned joy of someone who has never paid rent. The hens greet you with outrage, as though winter itself is your administrative decision. You scatter feed. They forgive nothing. In the little byre, the goat eyes you with criminal intent. She has somehow escaped her corner and is standing exactly where she should not be. Agon. You move her, she returns, you move her again. This is not farming, this is philosophy, a quirky tidbit. Many households gave animals names, tied to saints' days, family vems, or private jokes no outsider could understand. Livestock were practical necessities, but also daily companions. If a goose ruined your dignity every week, eventually it earned a proper name. Your goat is named Agnes, because she refuses correction with religious confidence. Back inside, breakfast waits. Steam rises from bowls of porridge thick enough to qualify as construction material. Bread is sliced. Butter, carefully saved, appears like royalty making a rare visit. Everyone gathers close to the hearth again. Morning light grows stronger through the frosted panes, soft and pale. Thomas asks if snow means school with Father Bernard is cancelled. Your mother nearly laughs into her porridge. God may rest, Father Bernard does not. Poor child. Education in the 1600s depended wildly on class, place, and luck. Some children learned letters at home, some from clergy, some not at all. Reading prayers mattered. Writing was a luxury. Arithmetic became suddenly important when markets were involved and mysteriously less important when chores were assigned. Thomas believes mathematics is a personal attack. Not entirely wrong. You eat slowly, warming hands around the bowl. The room smells of oats, smoke, wool drying by the fire, and the faint threat of goat. Comfort, not luxury, not abundance, just enough. And enough in winter is a kind of blessing. Outside, church bells begin at last, faint through the snow. The village waking fully now. Someone shouts across the lane. A cartwheel protests existence. A rooster, as always, performs badly but with confidence. The day has begun. There will be wood to split, water to carry, mending to finish. Someone must check whether the roof over the shed is still committed to being a roof. There is always work. Always another ordinary task holding the world together. That is the secret of most centuries. Not kings, not battles, not portraits of men standing near dramatic curtains. Just this. People keeping fires alive. People feeding hens. People sharing bread while snow gathers outside. People loving each other in practical ways because winter leaves no room for decorative affection. You stand, finish the last of your porridge, and pull on your gloves. The hearth burns steady behind you. Annie is already planning the day. Your mother is already predicting weather for next week and blaming the moon. Thomas is trying to convince the dog to attend lessons in his place. Innovation. You open the door. Cold air enters like unpaid debt. The snow is bright under the pale morning sun. You step into it, boots sinking, breath white in the still air. Another winter day, another ordinary miracle of survival. And behind you, in the house smelling of smoke and bread and old stories, the fire keeps burning.